Welcome to the Hawks Nest live stream show. My name is Brandon Kane, and I appreciate you for watching today on a wonderful Thursday as we are just about turned toward the weekend in the Pacific Northwest in the summer, and that only means you got yourself some great plans to get out there and enjoy it, and I hope you guys do, but thank you for checking me out here before you do. Hope you guys do have a great weekend, and got a little bit of fun discussion today. We've turned over some different parts in this off season. We're just looking around that corner there to July when we finally get training camp kicked off. But I thought that there would be a good topic to go through today where I have been a man trying to be pushing patience out there and in my outlook of things and in the discussions I've had with my fellow Seahawks fans and saying, well, look, we got a lot of change turning over, a legendary coach moving on, all of these things happening. We've got to be patient in our outlook in that way. And that is true. It may take us a little bit of time here to, have this thing kind of have those roots grow down deep and this thing to fully kind of mature to the place where we really become a contender maybe a season from now, maybe 2 seasons from now. But this team is in a unique situation from the turnover that just happened prior versus other places that you might turn over and see a legendary coach moving on. If we look at what in NFL history has been the circumstances of when that happens, you typically see something more akin to kind of what happened there with Chuck Noll when he moved on from the Steelers and Cowher had to take over, or Landry moving over and Jimmy Johnson took over. It wasn't that those young coaches couldn't get success quick. It was that they needed to get the talent influx rebuilt back up, along with, of course, getting their systems put into place. But it was as much the talent as the systems stuff there. One could make the argument that the talent in actuality is more here, and that there have been circumstances in NFL history where new coaches come in and been able to still benefit on the back of, having still some talent there on board to be able to push it forward. Look no further than the Cowboys when Jimmy Johnson moved on, where even though they probably had kind of a bit of a questionable coach for the NFL level and Barry Switzer, they still found themselves on a championship spot because the talent there was still good when they turned over, or George Seifert in San Francisco taking over for Bill Walsh, kind of a similar situation. And when you look at this team, the reason I'm making such a strong argument as to why the talent is really here, that this is a matter of, is the new coach going to be a good coach? Are the schemes going to work on both sides of the ball? Can they get both of those schemes instituted in a fast enough fashion to be a contender this year? Because that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm talking about the here and now. The future looks bright. I trusted McDonald long term. I think he's going to be a good coach. Won't know for sure until he's out there, but everything they've done looks smartly put into place for the future. That future that may take that patient timeline to get there. I keep coming back to the but. Coming back to that little bit of that but. Because a couple of years ago, your Seattle Seahawks made what will be looked at as a top 2, top 3 all-time trade in NFL history with the Russell Wilson trade. And I know many of you know this, but let's refresh our minds on this. You took those assets. You took this huge, mighty haul of assets, and you went out there and maybe had your best draft in NFL history or one of them. And this would not be an outlook of a Seattle Seahawks fan saying this. You can go through any litany of any draft pundits that you want to go through who looked at that Seattle Seahawks draft and go find me one that's shaking their finger at it, that's not saying anything but, wow, the Seahawks came away with a wonderful base of talent haul here. And I think it certainly has been proven to be that as these guys have come forward. And they came back the next year still benefiting from some of those assets there from debt. And you were able to again come back and have a very strong draft. Maybe not as strong, but very close to the same kind of similar level of strength. And this is when now you look at the roster and with this offseason kind of paring away stuff that's maybe not the best of money on the books, getting it all kind of sliced down in the right way, being able to still have the talent like guys like the DKs, the Tylers that are still on the roster that can still provide and be a part of this rebuild. And you go, okay, what if all that big bevy of talent that you have put together over the past few years comes together a little quicker than we think? Ascend a little bit faster than would seem possible. What does that mean at that point? And to me, sorry, we got a car alarm going off in the background. This is whenever you go live. To me, that means that the talent comes forward in a big way this year for sure. But I think that there's also some specific things that are going to occur or would have to occur for this season to become a winner. There'd have to be these, to me, exact kind of items that would have to go on, or at least a majority of these specific items would need to kind of happen for me to see this team getting to that contending state this season, the here and the now, not having to wait that extra year. There's obviously other alternative ways too, where you could have 5 guys turn into all pros suddenly, but that's hard to predict. And there are certainly a potential that could happen with this team and that young talent I just talked about. But I'm going to reach to more specific things and say it more as this happens as a good thing, this happens as a good thing, that happens as a good thing. And the equivocation of all that, the way that all bears out downwind is a team that can contend versus this was great, and that was great, and that was great, and that's how the team contended. Because I think it'll be more of that, and this is a bit in the way that John Schneider has built this past couple of years in drafting really well, signing pretty good contracts of good value, not really having anybody that's you're being taken over the knee on any of these contracts. We're not getting last couple of years prior. You were kind of feeling on a few of them like, are we getting kind of paddled on this one, or this feels, but not this year as much. And so things are pretty clear and clean. But let's look at a couple of specific things that I think would need to go on. And I'll love to hear your guys' thoughts on this as well. And if you guys are buying into this, for the Seattle Seahawks to become a contender this year, this season, for things to come together in the here and now. I think if all these things were to go on, or a majority of the things, bam, you're right there in a contending state. So let's start with just the top one off the rip with this. Abraham Lucas. And the beginning spot I'm going to begin with this team is not by coincidence. The spots on this team I start with on this, if you want to put it by order of importance, you could maybe do that. I don't know if I put Abraham 1 here, but it would be a very, very important part that Lucas can come back and play this year. George Fant has been a very serviceable tackle in this league. He is getting a little bit older, but tackles have shown they can play to an elder age. He has his various major injuries himself. He can probably do a little bit better than Stone Forsythe was able to do for you, taking over for Lucas if Lucas can't hold up. But you are going to need Abraham Lucas to be out there and steady like he was in that first season. When we look at the last 2 years and when the Seattle Seahawks offense was at its best, it was through that first 10, 11 game run with Geno Smith and the boys there where they were both healthy. Lucas's knee was feeling pretty good. Cross was on point with what he was doing. Then they kind of hit that rookie wall. Lucas got the knee injury, kind of bounced up a little bit, and you saw a bit of a dip in their performance to the back of that schedule. And then last year, of course, both of them sustained an injury week 1 that, in Lucas's case, basically knocked him out for the year. And then in Charles Cross's case, you have to wonder if he probably wasn't 100% coming back from that turf toe. But Lucas being able to be out there gives the Seattle Seahawks an impact player. This guy, let's not forget, was good from day one. He wasn't just, well, he's giving us flashes and looking raw. He was good from day one. One of the best starts of a rookie season I think we've had for a right tackle, going back to maybe, Sean Locklear, if you want me to go way back on the run on that one. So it's been a while since we had a guy that was that good a right tackle instantaneously. He comes back now, and he seems to be looking a little bit okay. He seems to be looking a little bit better. We've finally got a little bit of film here of him off season doing his dead leg lifts here. Knees looking good. As Dan Viennes noticed with this, note as well that he's doing these lifts without any knee brace. Without any knee brace. I think that's telling, because when those guys have that, I'm still feeling some instability, I'm still not feeling strong, it's still feeling dodgy, you will always see that knee brace on there in conjunction with that. But you don't see that here with Lucas. He seems to be ready to come back. And if he can do that, if he can be one of the pillars on this offensive line this upcoming season, I think it's going to be huge for our Seahawks in getting to that contending state. This was a 9-win team. If you can get the 2 pillars out there, and that brings me to the second guy, which is going to be Charles Cross. You get those 2 pillars out there like you had through those first 10 games of the season last year, you get things in a place where it's stable now. The pass protection starts to stabilize down. You would hope the interior off the inside line can be as good as well, but this is more, in my opinion, I'd like to see the interior get better. I think it's going to get even just a little bit marginally better, but this is the place where you can actually have some very close to impact at the position. And to get that from the 2 tackles and how that can help a quarterback out, how that can steady the waters for Geno Smith to be able to go through his progressions, to not have to just have one time for just a one read and let it rip kind of throw, which sometimes you'd have to do because he couldn't trust his protection as much, and especially off the edges. And in these guys, you can not only trust them in one-on-one. You don't have to provide chip help. You got a spread system you want to bring into play. A big part of spread system is being able to send a lot of guys out to run routes. It's very helpful. You can have the offensive linemen that can both hold up on their own edges there to be able to get that done. And the point I want to come back to with both Cross and Lucas on this, is that these guys are coming from into an offense now that they both played in college. Both of these guys have a background in air raid. Both these guys have a background in spread systems. It will fit to their skill set. And Cross, he's never going to be a mauler as a run blocker. He's not going to turn into Walter Jones as a run blocker. But he is a really good blindside protector. Laramie Tunsil has always been my theoretical upside guy for Charles Cross, and I think he can reach that level. He's been banged on a little bit this offseason by some Seahawks fans and their outlook of him and thinking that he's been a little bit of a disappointment. I argue that he is not. I think he was fighting through that turf toe last year, even when he came back. That tends to be one that nags you through the year, even once you do come back. And because he's a lineman, they go, well, you don't need it as much, so you can just kind of suffer with it. But you got to feel like they're probably not playing at 100% when that is the case, and they're dealing like that as he probably was. He's coming into year 3, contract year potentially coming up. If he can come out here and do this right, I expect him to be in his best shape. And if he can stay healthy and become that blindside protector, and then we have Lucas on the other side, here's the beginning blocks to me of a season where we can reach to contention. And it's going to be on the back of one specific thing through the first 3 or 4 of these items. And again, this is on purpose, in my opinion, because I don't think that we're going to be able to just ride or die on the back of the defense, hoping that that's going to be the single part to buoy everything up, that somehow they're going to be out there just running roughshod over everybody and the offense can just get by. The offense is going to have to be dominant here. And if you got 2 guys out there at tackle that are able to get the job done in the way that these guys are, being great pass protectors, but also great mobility guys. A lot of what you could see with Lucas in what he was doing with Washington especially was pulling back across the formation, a willingness to get out there in space and move cleanly for guys big as him and be able to get to his landmark, be able to hit his spot, be able to land that block. And Cross, very much the similar way. They passed at about a 73% clip at the college when he was coming out, so he was really asked to run block very infrequently within that spread system, but when he did it, he was well graded in how he did it there. So not that he can't do it, just wasn't asked to do it. Now he goes to a system. Lucas goes to a system that you could make the argument fits them very purely, maybe even more purely than the prior did. Next guy up, and again, you're going to see a trend through the first 4 on these, and that is going to be Kenneth Walker is maximized. I would love to see a cumulative 1,500-yard season from Walker between what he gets as far as running and receiving yards go. He's used as that weapon in this offense to where you get him in space, you get him those opportunities to really give him where he's not seemingly always surrounded so many times on so many runs. And when I went back and watched the All-22 and putting a video together for Kenneth Walker this offseason, I was shocked by just how many times he's getting the ball and he's getting hit, or how many times he's getting the ball and he could maybe get around this first guy, but there's the second guy right here, and the first guy can kind of use the leverage of the second guy to box him in. And sometimes even then he would get away. It was even wild then that he could pull it off. But so often was he being given those just clean, beautiful holes that he could run through and go and really, house it at that point. Go give you those big chunk plays, like the Saints run we saw in his rookie year, or the Charger run we saw in his rookie year, where they blocked it up right. He had a legit hole, hit the hole on time, and he was gone. And that's certainly a part of what he can provide you. It's there waiting beneath the surface of his game, but it's going to require a coach that understands how to put this kind of guy in the proper positions, which is don't use him like a bull, use him like the guy that can get on the outside and dance. Use him for the speedster he can be. He's got some power to him, but you're not going to use him as a power back. That doesn't make any sense. And too many A gap, too many B gap, too many power runs for Kenneth Walker over the past couple of years, especially when you don't block it well enough up front to be leaning back on those runs. I'm expecting this year to Grubb to go the opposite direction with it. I'm expecting him to love having a weapon like this to be able to utilize. And I think he's going to really build him into the passing attack as much as anything else here, where we really wondered with Walker coming out if he could be a guy that could be a pass catcher. He wasn't asked to do it at Michigan State, didn't have good quarterback play. He's proven as a pro, it's come on in his game that he absolutely can be a good pass catcher. I think he's even had a couple of really nice one-handers. So you can use him in that way out of the backfield too. The screen game's coming back into play this year. 1 in every about 8 plays, you're probably going to see a screen, sometimes a bubble, sometimes your traditional screen to Walker. But Walker will need to be maximized if you're going to be into a contending state this year. Not just simply you have a 2-headed attack between him and Charbonnet, but him actually maximized for what he can give you. And I think we've seen a little bit of it. It's definitely been there in the first 2 years, almost 2,000-yard seasons back-to-back, but there's more there. There's more there, much like this next guy on my list, DK Metcalf. Same wording, same situation. DK Metcalf maximized. DK Metcalf maximized. I think there are many pro Seahawks fans to DK who want to see him. I think the vast majority want to see him long-term here in Seattle. And I think that there is a small contingent that would say that that they'd be okay trading, but they're not quite involved. I think it's a much smaller contingent, vocal contingent, but a smaller contingent nonetheless. I think all sides would agree, though, that the Seattle Seahawks have not maximized what DK can fully do at this point. And they've done that by kind of putting him into a box. Just be over here, and this is your little role you served, where so many other teams in the NFL look to move a guy like this around, look to find creative ways to get him the ball, and not simply he's got to beat sometimes double coverage. And if he doesn't do that, he's not getting the ball, or he's going to be put in a position where there's going to be an easy double coverage slanted towards him over the top, because you always know he's going to be over there as the X receiver on that side of the field. And so it's easy for defenses to kind of build around their doubling up of him in the amount that they do want to do that. Is once again, we have confirmed he was a top 10 double receiver last year in the NFL. Just another thing I like to go to these people that are anti-DK, where I'm like, well, you obviously, I guess, know more than these 31 other NFL defensive coaches, because they seem to be doubling this man at a rate that doesn't seem to fit to the narrative of how bad, not bad, but how limited some of those that are on that side of it make the argument of with him. But he is not limited. And it sounds like the coaching staff has also figured this part out, as we have Mike McDonald speaking about the fact that we're going to be working DK. He was gushing about him here pretty recently, which was good to hear. Hopefully a ringing endorsement of this part and putting to bed any trade rumors or any of that type of nonsense. And he says, I can tell you this, we want to get DK the ball a lot. And there was a mic'd up video I was watching of Geno Smith at OTAs with DK there. And he was kind of getting people in the right positions, as you're going to do with a new offense. No, you got to come in motion. No, you're on the outside. No, come inside. And he leaned over to DK and goes, DK, you're inside. And we saw for really the first time last year, the Seattle Seahawks, through 5 years of DK Metcalf's career, actually use him some within the slot. Have a purposeful approach in how they used him in the slot. The Ravens game where you ran the crosser underneath, but you always ended up going back to that box. You always ended up putting him back in there. Going, no, well, you're really just we're going to put you over there. And some of this was trying to get the most out of JSN and utilize the tight ends and get there's reasons for why they did it beyond just putting him in a box, but that's where you ended up putting him, and that was not then best suiting DK to be maximized. And I do believe that there is a great season in this guy, not a good season, not just 1,000-yard season, not just he's a good guy, but I think there is a 1,500-yard season in here. And I think that while it's going to be hard for him in this offense with all of the targets to throw to get a guy into that spot, I also think the way that the Seattle Seahawks are going to look to utilize him will be a big part of making that potentially happen. And if you work to get a guy into space like this, like DK, it's going to make it so much harder on these defenses, because they want to draw those doubles naturally, and they want the easy read of the double. He's on the X, run the trail coverage. We got the free safety. We'll peel over more often than not if we're in cover 2, or we flip it and we've got the guy over there every time. We know it, but he's in the slot now. He's in a stacked bunch, and he's on the inside of the stacked bunch. Oh man, it's hard enough out of just a bunch look just to identify who your coverage markers are going to be when you're trying to count it off. We're going inside out, outside in. And so you end up in a spot at that point where you're really going to put defenses in a bit of predicament. You're going to get DK one-on-one opportunities, and he's going to smoke them. He's also going to get more use, I think, on the inside, run more post routes, more slant routes. Anytime he's run those over the past couple of years, more often than not, it's been a bit like stealing candy from a baby for him. It's been very easy for him to go take those and get open off those because, of course, the corners want to stay on top. Those routes open up because you're afraid of his speed. That's why as much as it's good, I think that's one of the places his route running's improved on those kind of routes over time since he's come in the league. But it's also the corner wants to stay on top, so in-cutting routes open up. This is how teams have attacked our defense for years, in that we want to stay on top naturally no matter who the receiver is. Other teams want to stay on top of DK because of how dangerous he is out there on the outside and how much they go, I know I'm not as fast as this guy. I got to be 2 steps behind him to make sure I got the get-up speed to catch up to him, or he's going to run past me. And so DK maximized, Kenneth Walker maximized, your 2 pillars starting it out. What does this all go to? What is the bottom line on this? My other point to this, the sort of the wrap it up on this individual point and this kind of bow to these ones, because there's some other measures I'm going to bring in here, but I want to put these all together on purpose. And that reason is because the offense needs to explode. If the offense can explode next year, pillars at tackle, running back and DK, truly looking like difference makers at the position, and then have an assemblage of depth behind them that can help them, where it's not just all on them. You can really kind of work the ball around and through in the way the Grub wants to. The offense can explode if those pillars get set up. Because if the pillars can set up like they did through the first 10 games, 12 games, I believe it was maybe 10 games of not last year, but the year before. As we saw, that was an offense that had Geno playing at like an MVP level through those first 10 games. That's 10 games is an MVP level. Not at like 5 games through, at 10 games playing at that kind of level. And then things dip down. But if those tackles can stay stable for a year out there on that side, and if the interior of the line can push itself up just above the spot of where it's been on this low water mark for years running now, where you just always seem on the inside to have a failing part, a worsening part, and an okay part. And that sort of just kind of fluctuates even game by game in the kind of performance you'll get by those three on the inside. If those can just kind of just stabilize a bit, they don't have to be, they don't even, to me, league average to get above the barrel where they've been. Just don't be in kind of a almost miserable state on things. Get yourself just a little bit above that. And I think this is where Grubb's offense is certainly going to help out, and getting the quarterback and the ball out of his hand very quickly at times, and not putting these guys, on islands. But it's also going to be, I think, just the improvement of talent. Having better guys on the inside that you can call upon, more pure fits to the scheme and what you want to do. Lucas Cross, come from spread systems, air raid systems in their college, going back to it now. Christian Haynes, best right guard mover in space in the draft, maybe the best mover in space in the draft as a guard, bar none. Bradford last year, one of the freakiest offensive line, physical specimens you'll find out there as far as his athletic profile go. Look at his RAS numbers, like 9.98 or something, 98th percentile type athlete, I think, something around that name per thing. So starting to build out Oluwatimi can do all that movement stuff space too. So now you're actually, instead before where you had with theoretically the Waldron Rams offense calling upon more mobility from the offensive linemen, and you really didn't have that. Blythe gave you kind of a little bit of it, and Brown, okay, but it wasn't there on the inside. Davian Lewis wasn't giving it to you. Phil Haynes wasn't giving it to you. Certainly not the Gabe Jackson that we had in here the year before wasn't giving it to you. So now you've got the guys that actually can operate within the scheme, that are fit to the scheme with their physical profile. I think it's going to hit. I think it's going to set. I think if you want to look at them getting to a contending state, I think they'll be good next year no matter what. But if they get to a contending state, it will be because they explode. And they will explode because these other supporting parts have come together in the way they have. That's going to benefit Geno, benefit the rest of the depth around with it. And then the offense can kind of carry a lot of the defense through, especially as it probably goes through the earlier part of its schedule, ironing out the kinks, getting things right. EJ Snyder, who I had on Bootleg Football, I had him on for an interview about a week and a half ago, pointed to the fact that he felt like this was not necessarily going to be as tough of an onboarding process with the defense, but it would certainly help the defense if the offense can come out and be that effective, because they are so talented, because they are so good now. And this is as good as the offense has been in years. It's hard to go find another time. And you're going to need a little bit of the talent to come forward. This is at the behest of this. The youth has got to come forward here to make this happen. But it is talented enough to do so. That's not in question here. These guys are good enough. It's just a matter of, is the time right? Will the seed break the soil? Will we get a bloom this season? We'll have to see on that. Next part on this for me is a big part of this is going to be a hot start to the season. And this is where we come back to the offense being good out the gate, giving the defense a little bit of time. I think the defense is going to be afforded overall when you go through about the first 7 weeks of the season. The defense is going to be afforded, I think, some benefits here to allow them to find their footing. First, the offense, I think, can make some hay against some of these defenses. You're going to get some rookie quarterbacks here, as we'll get definitely with Denver and New England, I would believe. We potentially will also get that with Atlanta. We'll see where they're at when we get to their spot of things. But when you do have a couple of tough games on here, Miami, San Francisco, those games are at home. Detroit's the real one tough game through the first 7 games to me that's really on the road. We'll see how Atlanta really is. I don't know if you guys are buying the hype on them or not. They'll be fine. It's not going to be an easy. I'm not saying they'll be an easy opponent, and playing them on the road especially. And I think that is a 10 a.m. game if I'm not mistaken. But I don't think that's going to be as daunting as you look through kind of the rest of the schedule, where you've got Buffalo, you're going to have the Rams twice, you're going to get Green Bay, you're going to get the New York Jets and potentially Aaron Rodgers. The Seahawks are going to get to contending state next year, and we're talking 12, 13 wins. We're talking to push for a division winner. You're going to have to accomplish that in jumping out to a 5-2, 6-2 kind of mark, where you really give yourself with some chance on that back half of the schedule for a little bit of leeway, because with all of those tough opponents, it's going to be hard to carve out there and say, well, you can go, 6-4 on the front end, and then you'll just go 5-5 or whatever on the back end, just kind of get up to that 10 win mark, 11 win mark, and think you're going to punch through there on that. So it's going to probably require getting it done early. First 2 games out the gate, Miami at home. That's going to be a tough one. Miami's no easy meal there. That's for sure. But you do get them at home versus playing on the road on that one. That's huge. Not a 10 a.m. game. That's huge. New York, we saw last year, we may be just kind of a tough matchup for them. I mean, we beat them the last couple of years, haven't we? So we haven't been exactly just an easy matchup for them in that side. And we'll see where San Francisco is. Detroit's not going to be easy. That's going to be a fun as hell game on Monday night. But you got to get a hot start here this season. I don't see you coming out 3-3 and finding your way to contending status by the end of the season if you don't come out to a hot start, as the schedule's kind of set itself up to allow you to do so, in my opinion. Next up, this one's going a little bit now to the defensive side of the ball. I think the defense is going to have its ups and downs this year and finding that footing with the new scheme, but it is so tremendously talented. I think even just getting to middle of the road with an offensive explosion can still push you to contending state. But that's only going to happen if the health of the inside linebackers is going to hold up. We got a recent Mike McDonald soundbite about the fact that both of our newly signed inside linebackers, Jerome Baker and Dodson, are dealing with health injuries right now that are preventing him through OTAs. And I think even one of them, they're not thinking they're getting him back, I think, to like early August or something, I believe. So you're a little bit worried right now when you look at the depth chart as it stands, because behind these two guys, there's not a whole lot, or I should say there's not a whole lot, at least as far as that's been tested, tried, and true. It's a big fat question mark if one or both of these two guys go down. And I just don't see where you have that situation happen where the either or, and that you have any of the backups you can call upon to go out there and that they're going to be able to maintain and hold the line and be able to get it done like the starters could get it done. Tyrese Knight has talent, and maybe Mike McDonald can work his magic on him in the first season, but I think it's going to take him a little bit of time, probably a year, to be ready to be out there to really, truly compete to be a starter. Otherwise, he's going to get exposed if you put him out there. And John Radican, I don't know if he's got enough in the tank to get that done. I know some of you love Drake Thomas, but we just come back to that untested side of it. And if you have these two guys out, it's hard for me to see, even as good as Mike McDonald's been able to get his defense going, you to have this defense able to get itself to a middle of the road state. Because while Mike McDonald's been able to get by without the superstars within his defense, he did have Patrick Queen able to play a pretty good level there at will, and he was able to get Roquan Smith playing a really high level at the inside linebacker. You remove those elements from his defense, what happens to his defense at that point? Especially because the backups may not have that same kind of versatility as these two starters do, where in Jerome Baker and Dodson, you have two guys that have both played the will and played the mic, understand either duty, and have really a kind of full skill set to their game where they can play the run, play the pass. They don't do anything great, but they all do pretty good down the line, all of their abilities within each of those capacities. And so you do lose that. It's going to make it hard on the defense. It'll be straining the defense, I think, and potentially would maybe even push the Seattle Seahawks to have to make a trade at that point. But the inside health of the inside linebacker, as much as any position on this defense, is going to have to hold up this year if the Seahawks are going to hope to get to a contending state. On that same note, in regards to the defense, the pass rush is going to be there. We got after last year. We got some good amount of pressures, good amount of sacks. Did a good job with it. No doubt about that. But run defense has been a problem. Run defense has been the thing that has not been there for the last 2 years, and we've been kind of league worst at it. We've had times where teams can at will run against us, where we just don't have any answers, and they're just rolling right through us, and we know the run's coming. They know we know the run's coming, and it's going to be a 5-6 yard gain. And some of this is the defense wearing down at times in football games. This comes to, you look at Mike McDonald's scheme and hope that maybe a happy benefit of it out the gate would be, even if you can't really draw the defense up higher in its overall play, maybe you can get them off the field more often, get them with more of the 3 and outs so that they don't have to be as much on the field for as long through the early part of the game, and then able to sustain as the game goes along, as opposed to just having those 2, 3, 14, 15 play drives that happen throughout the early part of the game, which then obviously leave them winded as it clicks into about 5 minutes to go in the third quarter. You start to feel that fatigue setting in on your defenders, where they've been on the field for too long. Your offense hasn't got enough done. And that's been a part of it. Some of it has been a bit of a lack of talent on the defensive line. They reshuffled through all their 4 guys that they had in the line from the prior year to last year, but it speaks to John Schneider and how he has hammered the position now to go out there and be able to bring in a Draymond Jones, trade for Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy as the pickup, bringing back Jaron Reed in here, Cam Young in the 4th round, who's a development guy that they hope can come along, and you're just, hey, just fit in here as that backup to Jaron, be able to offload some of his snaps, be able to keep him balanced in that spot so that he can get it done to his on his side, not get wore down as the year goes along. It all has to work together. The inside linebackers' health has to work in there. The corners are going to need to tackle better, guys like Trey Brown, Tariq Woolen, but the run defense needs to shore up. You're not going to be a contending team if we're going to be able to reach into week 10, 11, 12 of the season and see our defense in a place where, again, teams are just going to be able to go at them, go time and time and time again. I'm really not expecting this again because they're going to get off the field quicker. I think Mike McDonald has more at the forefront of an ability to deal with the run and some of the creative running concepts than the prior defense did. We'll have to see when it all goes live with it, but if you are going to be a contending team, hard to see them being, again, a team at even 24, 23 against the run and seeing that as a team that's contending. It's probably got to be into more of a top 15 state if we're going to get to that place of truly, being a team at 12, 13 wins and vying for, be talked about in that way. And it is possible because they have actually reinforced the position. Go look at the depth chart of the Seattle Seahawks in 2022 on that defensive line and go look at that defensive line depth chart now. And I think everyone would say that that's a pretty wide change from where they were before. And understandable when you look at before why they struggled. Oh yeah. Okay. You had this guy and that guy, and you were hoping Poona Ford was going to be your dynamic 3-tech pass rusher. Yeah, I guess I could see how that went down. Oh, you were leaning on 35-year-old Al Woods to save your butts inside? Yeah, I can kind of see how that defensive line just couldn't quite get it done there. That makes sense. That tracks. Next up, I think another part that's going to have to happen is if this defense turns into another World War I battle and everyone on every side is just running their howitzer. I don't know if it may none of us be a contender. Maybe just one of us survives. It's like Highlander, and they just eat all of the souls of the rest, and then they're able to be the best from that, whoever gets and carries through that. I do think this is where we need a little bit of Lady Luck to give us a little bit of a touch here. It's like, okay, a little magical touch from Lady Luck, and that is that you see one of the two entities, not both, but one of the two entities up there at the top, because if this turns into a kind of a bit of just war every week within the division, and it's very possible that it turns out to be that way because the division is looking like bare minimum right now. We're probably going to be at least the second toughest division in football, if not the toughest. But what helps contenders? What's a big part that aids them in their way? I've always said this for years. It's one of my pet theories. I call it the feast factor. And that is when you look at most teams that go out there and win Super Bowls, you can say, you can point to your Brady's, you can point to your Mahomes. I point to the feast factor. And that is that you have a couple teams within your division that you're able to go through during your schedule of your year and be able to just get through those games because you're benefiting in the back that they're kind of falling down. Niners coming back after a Super Bowl loss. They are definitely deep into this Super Bowl window. In fact, they're longer into this Super Bowl window than our Seahawks had with the Legion of Boom. Damn near just about, feels almost twice as long a bit of a run that they've had at this chop. So they're definitely getting down to the end of it. Trent Williams wants more money. Brandon Ayuk's doing this whole drama Instagram session with Jaden Daniels, I guess, trying to get the Washington Commanders to trade for him. He's like, they don't want me. They don't want me, man. They don't want me. So they've got that to deal with. They've certainly are going to be kind of, I think, still very strong this year, but some issues at home still with the Niners. There's potential for them to fall down. And it looks like there's going to be a trade at this point. So the minimum, they're going to be a little bit weakened from where they were last year. It would seem like if one of those guys got to go, I call it the duck, goose thing, where you got Kittle, Debo, Brandon Ayuk. They understand they're going to have to pay Purdy in a year. They have to prepare for that. You don't deal with that a year out. You don't go, well, we're $38 million in dead money next year. We'll get around to it next year. No, you got to start to set the stage for that now. That negative $38 million you're looking at right now is going to start to need to be offloaded off the books. The thing that doesn't accomplish that is a $30 million a year deal to Brandon Ayuk. So somebody's going to have to go. They become a little bit weaker. What happens if a couple other injuries pop up? What happens if 36-year-old Trent Williams can't get all the way through another season? Or a guy like Kittle that's been beat up quite a lot through his year can't go through? Or Christian McCaffrey he's at that spot on his, and I'm not praying for injuries here. I'm just saying this kind of has to happen with us in this scenario. To me, is one of these, this also needs to pop up where a couple injuries hit that Niner team, a couple injuries hit that Rams team at just the wrong positions. This is true for a lot of teams out there, I think, but not every team in this way. And if those injuries hit, that it really does, I think, sink them down a good mark, that their strength and how good they are going to be relying on these key pieces towing the line. Look at the Niners and you say, they lose Fred Warner and Trent Williams. What does that do to the Niners? Do we still look at them as a top team in this division, as a contending team? I don't know if I would. I think that would change it pretty mightily for me. And the Rams in a little bit of a similar situation. Stafford, especially, you guys, every single year is banged up. Can he get through on it with his health? Are they able to just bounce right back off the Aaron Donald retirement like it's no thing? Are they able to just go, yeah, no problem. We can just get over that. We'll have to see. But I think if one of these two teams falters, that's going to be a bit of the part we look back on when we look at the end of the season. We go, man, we thought the Rams were going to be good and they ended up at 7 wins. Or we thought the Niners were going to be up at their 12 wins. They went up 8 wins. Not saying the teams fall completely off, but that they just drop back into that spot a little bit where it's just not quite as hellacious going through the totality of the NFC West in the way this year. We'll see with it. They're definitely lined up to be good teams, but I think that's part of it. Last thing that's going to have to happen if the Seahawks are going to need to be a contender, I'm a big believer in this, and that is that the price of admission here in this day and age, as you come down the stretch, is more and more pushed and leans you into the direction of needing to make a go-for-it type move. Seahawks, of course, did this and miscalculated last year with the Leonard Williams, or you could look at it through a different lens and say, hey, they brought Leonard Williams in as much to court him, to get him sold on the program so that they could retain him via free agency, and the plan worked. You could, say no to that, but that is the way that it did play out. I'm not sure that you would have got Leonard Williams here in Seattle if you had not traded for him. But look away from the Seahawks situation just to when you look across the NFL and at teams that have deemed themselves competitors. So what I say that we need to have at the beginning of this list, a hot start. The trade deadline has been pushed back in the NFL this year. The Seattle Seahawks have the full totality of their selections in the upcoming draft, and they're due to probably have 2 compensatory picks to also play with if John Schneider wants to work around here. Draymond Jones just restructured his contract in the last week. The Seattle Seahawks now have about $8.5 million to spend. Now, they don't truly have $8.5 million to spend because about $5.5–6 million of this is going to go to a reserve fund, which is injury releases you got to sign out. If you got to sign guys off the street because you run low on certain things, you got to have this sort of reserve fund that fans don't often think about. But you still will have about $3.5 million. We're talking about mid-year of a trade deadline, so it's a half a salary of a year, or even now because it's been pushed, I think, to week 10. You're pretty deep into the season to be able to make this kind of move and do something a little bit creative at that point. Not to mention we've seen in these deals at times the Seahawks been able to pull off with general managers to get them to eat some of the salary, where you don't even have to take on the full onboard of the player's salary. They pulled this off recently with the Williams deal with the Giants, where we got the Giants to eat a portion of that contract. And then I think we also saw this with the Jadeveon Clowney contract when he was on the franchise tag, where in that deal, we got the Houston Texans to pay a portion, I think a good portion of his franchise tag on that contract that year. So you just need a couple $1 million in there to get it done. You got the draft picks to swing it. I don't know what position might open up that they could go out there and address. This is a little bit of a play it to the moment situation. But I think that if you're looking at the team getting to that contending state, John Schneider has already shown you in years past, Quandre Diggs, Carlos Dunlap trade. He understands this is kind of the price of admission now. This is a little bit of the looking at it through a bit of a new angle now with, how this should show up for people, I guess, because historically speaking, you would look at this if you're in 2012 and you say trade deadline deals don't work. It takes too much time to bring guys in for a program and get them up on the plays and all this, the chemistry, and you just don't get the benefits of it. You end up, paying for something you don't get the returns of. And I just say to that, it just depends on the position. Did the Rams get the returns for getting Odell Beckham in there late? Did they get the returns for getting Von Miller on a second and third round deal that they had to give up to get Von Miller? Yeah, they love that deal. For that was an amazing deal from their perspective of things at this point. Got to help to get them their championship, help to put them over the top. That's what these kind of moves do. Help to potentially put you up over the top. I'm not advocating right now, but I'll tell you right now, if we're 7-2, I'll be advocating like a mofo. I'll be advocating right and left, saying, make the move. We're in the position we think you can get it. If these other factors have all happened that I just set the stage for, then go and make that move. Go out there and do something dynamic and see what you can do. Why not? And that's only if you can read it. And the nice part about this is you don't have to make the call like you did before 2 to 3 weeks prematurely. Last year, let's just take out the fact that we were courting them. Let's say it was just a trade deadline deal. Because I'm certainly guessing on this. Could come back to this and find that we find out in retrospect. No, they didn't know if they were really going to be able to sign him. There wasn't really any thought to that. They thought they were that close. And that, could be the deal. And if you had a couple more weeks last season to make that call, maybe you don't make that deal. Maybe you can be more instructed on the proper path you want to take. But same way, if they are deeper into the season next year when the trade deadline hits and in a position to strike with the extra compensatory picks in Schneider's back pocket, and especially if he feels like maybe the quarterback position is a little bit stabilized, not just both with Geno, but with Sam, in his trust of those two guys and the lack of need to package picks to go get a QB up in the draft, maybe you'll see him make a trade deadline deal. And again, he's done it many times over. So certainly not something that John Schneider is shy about doing. Last note, it's the forgotten part of the team, but it's the part of the team that could be coming back this year in a big effing way. The hardest mounts of Choco. And that is going to be the elite special teams. They are often forgot about, not remembered, often forgotten. But in Seattle, the special teams unit has been the most stable, consistent force on this team over the past couple of years. Michael Dickson is having what could be argued as maybe the best start to a punter's career in NFL history. It's just been lost a little bit because he's a punter and people don't pay attention to punters. But punters are people and they matter. And Michael Dickson absolutely matters. He can flip a field. He can punt it inside the 20. He can give you hang time and depth. He is the 5-star tool prospect like you'd have in baseball at the punting position. And he has been absolutely fantastic on that side of it. Jason Myers is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Now, this is good news and bad news. So the bad news is Dr. Jekyll's coming. There's no way around it. You will get Dr. Jekyll. And he sucks. Dr. Jekyll will break your heart. He's going to hit about 80% of his kicks. Best case scenario, maybe 75. A couple missed PATs in there. Probably going to miss a game winner at some point during the year. That's the Jekyll Hyde Jason Myers. Okay, that's the Jekyll. Now the Dr. Hyde, he's pretty effing awesome. He's great. And while it is bad news that you have to deal with Mr. Jekyll, Dr. Hyde's cool. And the good news part of it is that you can calibrate it like a clock with Jason. I don't know why. I don't know if it's maybe a deal he had to make with the devil to be a good kicker in the NFL. But it's just the way it plays out, which is if you track Jason Myers through his career, and it's like 10 years in now, folks, so we're not on sample size data here. 10 years in. Yeah. Good, bad, good. Well, it's actually more great, bad, great, bad, great, bad, great, bad, great. And the good news is you're flipping around next year to a great season. So we're going to have Michael Dickson punting his ass off. You're going to have Jason Myers being a sniper out there from the kicking position, able to hit the 50-yarders with ease, even in that stadium where it can be brutal conditions for kickers. And then we get the other added element brought into this, which is the Seattle Seahawks have maybe potentially taken a little bit of a hopeful leap forward from other NFL teams in their outlook a little bit at the new kicking rules, because with bringing back and still residing and keeping D. Eskridge here, and part of that move could be the hope that you could reclaim his second-round status and eventually turn him into somewhat of a useful wide receiver. I think more of it is a little bit of the thought that the kickoffs are coming back this year, and they are going to be a part of the game now where they have been relegated to that redheaded stepchild aspect of the NFL recently, even more than PATs, where every NFL offseason there was a new rule to shutter it away because they were trying to remove the collisions. Well, now they've taken, I guess, with the UFL kind of kickoff rules here, and it may open it up to a lot of interesting nuances and turns that we're not expecting, because you have these special teams coaches having all of this offseason to sort of turn over in their head the various myriad of ways that they can attack utilizing these new kickoff rules. And it's coming back into play, and it's going to be a factor in games. And what the Seahawks have done now is with Eskridge last year, though it is a very small size, this would be sample size. He only had a couple returns last year, but he did have the highest kick return average of anybody in the NFL on those returns. So it was a sample size. He got injured again, as does happen. But he does bring at least that maybe bottom level ability, whatever happens with him as a receiver, he maybe can bring that to the Seahawks. He has that instant acceleration, which should be the benefit to these new kicking rules, is the instant acceleration. The ability not to allow those, you got all these guys spread out wide and everybody's coming down like this, and it's going to take them a little bit of time to get to you. You got a little bit of a crack of light there to kind of go through. And if you got a guy that can just hit it and go, then he might have himself a little crack to get through before the rest of the help can kind of arrive. Some of this is just how we're going to have to see how they defend it. Do teams just kind of pull back and swirl it? It's going to be weird to see kind of, and I think there'll be some give and take between the two sides as they both kind of try to find their footing on this one. But having Eskridge with his kick return ability and then Laviska Shenault, because as Eskridge was the top rated kick returner in the NFL last year, Laviska was number 2. Again, both guys not running a lot of kick returns, as for whatever reason with Laviska, teams just haven't used him as much in that part of his game. I thought that would be exactly what you'd be using for him coming out of Colorado. Him punt return, kick return, bubble screen, gadget guy. But he's not done a lot of it up until this point as a kick returner. He's got it in his game though, and he did a good job of it last year. So you got the top ranked, the top 2 kick returners from NFL last year, albeit though there's that sample size. You got the punter, you got the kicker coming into a good year. He's going to give you Dr. Hyde. And so that should give you an elite special teams. And if that gives you that, with the explosive offense and the parts within that explosive offense, I think that are key. With a defense with just certain specific spots holding the line. Inside linebackers holding up with their help. The run game getting shored up. I know our guys can cover on the outside. I know our safeties are going to hold the water. I know we can get to the quarterback. I know Mike McDonald's creative scheme is going to create sacks unto its own. It's going to create turnovers unto its own because he's going to confuse quarterbacks and get them to throw the ball early when they don't want to. That stuff's going to be baked within the bread. These other parts, I don't know. These other parts are going to be the big key here if this team is going to be that contending team for 2024. I will continue to push for patience. I will continue to say that I hope this team can stay in that pocket of just stay the process. We don't have to rush it. I'm going to advocate for a trade deadline deal, but that's only if we are running. That's only if we're starting to look like we can get out to lapping the competition, a little bit like, the Mariners are doing right now over there on the baseball side of it. And if that's the case, then I'm always going to be aggressive in those moments because you never know when you're going to be back in that spot again. So you got to take advantage, even if it's in the first season of a new coach. But it would take all of these things coming together, in my opinion, for this team to reach this state this season, to find that footing this year. It is possible. And it's possible because the unique standpoint that we sit on here, which is that Mike McDonald is walking into a room where he's got dogs in the room already. He's got a full house of players who can get the job done. It's not empty. He doesn't need to be like Carroll walking into this when he had Moore's roster that he inherited. You'd missed on the Aaron Curry pick. Lofa Tatupu's body was starting to fall apart. Offensively, Walter Jones is getting done. You got just Matt Hasselbeck is kind of at the end of the rope in the line with him and what you have to do with him. You got a lot of big decisions and choices you had to do at that time, Carroll. And that's why they churned over that roster so much. That's not what is called upon here. And because of that, the potential of a great season does lie ahead for your Seattle Seahawks this year. I will push for patience. I'm not saying this is going to happen with some certainty, but I will say that these are all feasible things that I presented that can happen. And that's why I chose them specifically as I did, is I wanted to make sure I'm not picking for things that are out just the stars got to shoot and God's got to grant a wish and somebody's got to go find a genie in a bottle for those things to happen. Instead, let's make it into kind of hopefully a realistic spot for this to occur. But let me know what you guys think. Do you have a key that I might have missed that you think holds the line on this upcoming season that will weigh heavily over whether or not our Seattle Seahawks can be contenders? Is there just no chance, in your opinion, the Seattle Seahawks can be contenders this year? Let me know below in the comments. Let me know down in the here in the chat as we'll do some discussion today. I appreciate you guys watching. Please do, if you guys could, hit that like button for me. I would really appreciate it, as it does help this channel out and helps it tremendously, as we did cross 16,000 and we are on our way to 20,000 this year. As well, just a quick other, two little quick other notes. And that is, we've got a Hawks Nest Clips channel that's rolling along right now. I do clips of the live stream segments and get them chopped over that side of it. It's a long request that we get that going. So I will have that over there and continue to keep pushing that content over there. So do get subbed up over to the Hawks Nest Clips channel, as it will continue to be a big part of what we do going forward into the season. Also, quick thank you to the sponsor of the show. It's going to be Underdog Fantasy. You can get Underdog Fantasy today and utilize the code today to be able to get you matched up to 100% of your first deposit, up to $100. Just got to use the code NEST. They've got some Caitlin Clark picks on there right now that you can take advantage of. So there is some always great matches going on. Want to take advantage of this Mariner run? Do some daily fantasy stuff as they're getting hot. Get on top of it. Use the Underdog Fantasy app today, and it's just you can click the description link in the section below, or just use my code NEST. And first deposit, $100 from me to you through the Underdog app, and you sponsor the channel at the same time. You help it out at the same time. You tell the sponsor, stay with that guy. He's pretty cool. But thank you guys for watching today. I hope everyone's having a great start to their summer. We are very close to football season. And last little note I just want to put out there is that I am indeed coming back to Seattle. So the Hawks Nest will be coming to Seattle for training camp. I'm going to do a couple days. We're going to do we'll do a meet and greet location, probably somewhere up around near where training camp is. But if you guys are up and around in the area at that time, please do feel free to join me. I'll be letting you guys know more details of that once we get a little bit of the training camp dates announced, so I know exactly when I'm going. But I want to go for a couple of days. Really stoked. This is the first time I'm doing it here and doing the channel in 5 years, going to training camp. So we're going to go get it. We're going to go get it. God's Gang, thank you for the $10 donation. I really do appreciate it, God's Gang. Hope you're having a great night. He says, good day. He says, so I was listening to the Behind Enemy Lines worth the Rams guy. With all respect, he was greatly underestimating the Seahawks. I feel I know I'm a Hawk, but this roster is stacked. I think that there's going to be a lot of selling of the Seahawks, God's Gang, this year. I'm expecting it not just from pundits, or analysts, but also even people that are in a bit of the content creating game like Zach is with Payo Sports and with the Rams and his outlook of it. I think that they're fair in their outlook of it because it's a little bit of one that isn't there easily seen, where you can just kind of glance at the Seahawks and you go, oh, that guy. You got to look a little bit more closer at what's going on here and what's been going on here. And that this isn't a team coming off 3-4 wins, bringing on a new coach. This is a team coming off 9-10 wins, then a 9-win season last year. So they've not been bad. That's not a roster that's bereft of any talent that's doing that. And you do go to the fact that the last 3 drafts have felt so strong. And that first draft, Boye Mafe getting better into year 2. It kept getting kind of better and better. If Tariq Woolen can get back to that year 1 kind of show, and even Tariq Woolen, it's really just the tackling because he was still right there with the coverage numbers from the prior year. It was really just the tackling stuff you came down to on him. But those drafts, these last 3 drafts have been so good, and the value standpoint that they've operated in has been so strong that it's just allowed them, in my opinion, God's Gang, to give Mike McDonald a very unique situation for a new head coach that I would say 90% of new head coaches don't get to walk into this type of situation. When Dan Quinn's got to walk into Washington, is he walking in with it stacked to the ceiling? Or is it more like, I got Terry McLaurin, and I got LaRon Payne, and I got Jonathan Allen, Jaden Daniels. We got Jaden. You got to go through and sit there and this is going to take a little bit of time. But Mike gets to come in and he's like, DK Metcalf, Ty Lockett, Jackson at the Jigba, Geno Smith, 2 bookend tackles. I got 3 techs that can all get the job done. 1 that can play off the edge. Boye Mafe, young developing edge rusher. Derek Hall, if I can get him tapped into what that talent was at. The secondary, Julian Love, who's a pure fit for this scheme, has played in this scheme once before and played well within it. Played even well as the year went along last year in a bit of a different role with the Hawks and what they did with him. And you go just all the way down the line and think, okay, it's a little different. a little different. Most coaches coming in have to deal with some. They gotta roll it through a little bit, and I think this is also why so many people have noted the fact, God's gang, that Mike Macdonald has not turned over the roster, as though many were expecting this need to turn it over from Coach Carroll because you got to get your guys in, your guys. I think it was more of Mike Macdonald coming in and his discussions with Schneider, and probably during the interview process where he said, no, it's there's been a bit of an underperformance here. We can get these guys to perform better. It's not a lack of their ability to get them there. We can get them there. And you can read into that and whose fault that is as you will. It doesn't matter whose fault. It's how it gets fixed. And if he's got the way to get that fixed, the talent is there already. It's just to fix that part, God's gang. And that's why I wanted to do this show, because I will be advocating so very hard for peace, advocating hard for patience, because of the fact that this is a new system on both sides of the ball. And it's going from that simple to complicated, and who knows how long that might take. But in that who knows is also both sides of that who knows coin, which is there could be the side of the coin where it takes a long time. There could be the side of the coin where it happens like that, because there's so many built-in easy advantages to take advantage for this football team now that have been somewhat prevented from taking advantage from in the past, or just haven't had the ability to take full advantage of within the systems that they've applied. But well said on your part, God's gang. And I get where Zach's coming from. I think that there's going to be a lot of disbelievers out there nationally with the Seahawks team, but I think that they're more, rather than them being, blind to something, I think that they're more playing what you get prototypically in these type of situations and how it seems to play out in that first year. And that when you tend to fire off a coach, there's this sort of, well, that must mean that they're just not, roster's probably not good and coach probably wasn't very good. It's a bit of a different horse of another color here, right? God's gang. But well said on your part, and thank you for the $10 donation. Sweetie Shinobi Misfit, how you doing? Playlist Trav, what's up? He says, I love the cover art. Well, thank you, man. I was having some fun with that in the middle of the night. I saw them, the Hawks went to the fort, and they gave him all the super big dog bazookas, and I was like, okay, I gotta use this for a thumbnail. Ricardo, we got an elite squadron here. We do indeed. How you doing, Megan? Addicted to the Hawks, what's up? He says, hey, Brandon, A12s, didn't Pete and the Hawks struggle his first year? Contention in first year is a kind of high bar for McDonald, maybe? It is going to be a high bar. And that's why I will not be saying that I expect this to happen, that this is going to be where this will go. I just say that if this does occur, this is what it would take. And I'm also saying that there's a chance, there's a better than reasonable chance that this could occur. It's not that you count on it, but if it happened, it wouldn't be that we'd be all godsmacked by it going, no one could have ever seen the Hawks being this good this year, because you're right. When Carroll came in from Mora, it was going to take him some time. But that's that part that I come to where it's what are the factors that hold a previous team back? And was the previous team held back from a lack of talent, or was the previous team held back from a lack of other things outside of the talent's control potentially? And again, I'm not trying to make this a blame game to Carroll. This is even something that Randy Mueller, I sat down with the former Seattle Seahawks general manager, a guy that's been a general manager in other spots in this league, and who's still very connected in the league, and asking him about it. And his outlook was also that the Seattle Seahawks had underachieved the past couple of years, that his feeling with this roster that they should have been better. And so I don't think this is a big thing to say that it's the lack of talent. And when you look at the Mora teams, I think with Mora, it was more of a, rather than an either or, it was both. It was, you missed on the Aaron Curry pick. He was going to be basically a bust. And Hasselbeck and Lofa Tatupu were getting old. I think you had Julian Peterson and Kearney in there for a year, and they were out. Everything was just, had kind of gotten frayed. You have Tim Ruskell coming in, and he was drafting weirdly in a certain way. Tim Ruskell drafts did not produce a lot of talent at the end there. So Carroll had a lot more to do, not only to instill his system, but then also to get the right talent in there to get it done, which is why it took as long as it did. But I think if you have the talent in place, much more reasonable, or potentially reasonable, to think that the coach can take it quicker and faster than to the top. It's a matter of how talented is this team. And I'd say pretty damn talented. It's young. It may take them a bit to reach the upside of that talent, but the talent is undeniable, in my opinion. Playlist Trav, thank you for reminding me. Please hit that like button, folks, if you could for me, and maybe sub up. Sentai Ranger Donnie, how you doing? It's good to see you in the house. Nagasa, how you doing? He says, I'm not sure if that draft was that good. Cross is average. Maffe's good. Lucas barely played. Woolen is okay. Woolen's a really good cover guy. Not necessarily great on the tackling. That part's got to come up. I'm certainly anticipating it's going to come up a little bit with that. Walker's been really good, Nagasa. Cross, again, on the average front, we come back to the situation last year where it wasn't a bad year last year. And if he's playing to average through a rookie year where he's strong, and then last year where he's playing on the turf toe, I think it's reasonable to expect he can get better. But again, these are part of the reasons, Nagasa, I've got these in the main reasons that I've got them as my hammer points for why this is what this would take for us to get to contending state. Is if it proves to be that those guys are the way that you label it on that, then yeah, you're not going to get to contending state at that point. Those factors have to be in play to make it happen. Nolan, how you doing? Good to see you in the house. Ricardo says I'd wait for cuts or even the trade deadline for a linebacker. That definitely could be a target spot for them, is that they look to go there. And the good news with that is that does seem to be a position. Look at how Roquan Smith took to the Ravens defense coming in there right off the gate from Chicago. No problemo. That defense turned right around when he came in there. So maybe a way that they're able to go there. Rand the Cut, he says, I feel a big season coming from K9. He almost makes the first man miss. He does indeed. That's where if I think you just get the couple extra guys off his back and give him a little bit of that breathing space, he becomes all that much more effective. Isaac says, let's effing go Hawks. Coach Mike and JS has been building the run wall. I can't freaking wait. P.S. More Bobo, please. More Bobo. Another guy that part of that talented group that's in there that you go, boy, so good, but where are you going to find him even a spot on the team? We got so many guys out there and only so many balls to go around. But Bobo, by the way, interesting enough, I don't know why ESPN's listing it this way, but he's listed currently as the punt returner, the starting punt returner on the ESPN depth chart. That'd be pretty wild. I'm not saying no to that, by the way. I'll take Bobo on. Who says that's not going to work? What say you? Dick Talks, hey, says, how can I get some great San Diego tacos delivered to Brandon's place? He's cooking right now. Thank you, man. I appreciate that. I just got to throw a stone. That's all I got to do. Just walk right up the street and there's about 4 places. Duran J says, killer thumbnail. Real pick too. Nice. Oh, yeah. You know, Duran, when I saw that thing, I was like, oh, I'm using this thing. The stealth bomber might have been a bit much. The stealth bomber with the Seahawk emblem on the underside might have been a little bit over. But at 2 a.m, Duran, you just can't help yourself when you're messing around. Chris says, when you mainly use him in double coverage or 50-50 ball, you're definitely not using him to his full potential being DK Metcalf. No, you're not, Chris. No, you're not. It's allowing, number one, it's making it harder to get him open. It's making it easier on defenses to identify him and deal with those double teams. The easiest double team for a wide receiver to me is I have safety help over the top and I have a trailing corner. And the trailing corner will be in press. So he can sit there and try to press DK to death. And he knows if I press DK or miss my press and DK gets me by a couple of steps, that safety is going to drive down hard on the backside to keep me clean over the top so I can catch back up. And if you can move him into a slot, or you can even have DK in motion sometimes, God forbid, prior to the snap, what does that do for defenses in trying to identify whether or not they're going to double team him and how they're going to double team him? DK is going from X and he's sliding in and he slides into the inside shoulder of Jackson Smith in the slot. And the plan now your outside corner goes to JSN. Now your slot goes to DK. You got a mismatch there with the slot and DK because the slot's going to be 5'10", right? Usually undersized guy and DK at his size. So now what do the linebackers do? Do the linebackers now, by their decision, turn into the double to try to help on DK with the slot? Do you try to bring the safety down from the different area? It just to me is a little harder to figure out. This is why guys like Cooper Kupp and Justin Jefferson can sometimes, and Amon St. Brown even at times, can look like this, where they're almost unguardable because there's really not as many option spots for you to double a guy in the inside as much. You can do it. Not to say you can't, it's just more complicated to do so. Because the benefit you always get on the outside when you got an X receiver and you're doubling that is you always got the sideline to your favor a bit as a defense. They can't throw it past the sideline. So we can kind of use that as a little bit of buffer on the player along with the double team. It almost turns into sometimes a little bit of a third defender there, where inside you got your two-way goes. They can go either way. It's going to be good. It's going to be real good. Nick Guzman says, Geno, DK, Tariq Woolen, Spoon will be all pro this year. Mark my words. Boy, you got Reek and Spoon as all pro in that secondary. Look out. Look out. But that's where I do come with Reek. It's not much like with Cross last year. There's a bit of a narrative with Woolen of bad year last year. Wasn't bad. It's just that there were good parts to it, and there were some parts that were not as good. Definitely there's some room for growth there. And I do always come back with Reek to say, understandable, a guy that just moved over to cornerback 3 years ago to the position. 4 years ago, he was tackling nobody. 3 years ago, he needed to learn to tackle. Let's give that guy a little bit of time to maybe kind of figure that out. And maybe he just never does. But we have seen in a guy like Trayvon Diggs, who was miserable as a tackler coming out of Alabama. I can't tell you how bad of a tackler he was on the tape. And it was right there in the first year or two with him as well. And it's gotten a bit better. He's been able to improve it, but much like with Tariq Woolen, you had in Diggs a guy that was transitioning from the wide receiver position to the cornerback position late in his college career. And so you give him a little bit more of that room, I think, to develop that part. But I like your prediction, Nick, and I hope you're right. Megan says, Hawks Nest, I need to get back to work. Have a good day at work. Isaac says, whoever stole my copy of Microsoft Office, I will find you. You have my word. Look to China, Isaac. Look to China. Duran, hi, Brandon. Love your Seahawks content. Thank you, Duran. Good to see you in the house, man. Appreciate you. Duran says, DK absolutely has the talent to be Megatron 2.0. I've been saying it myself. I've gone to the stat many a time. I've said, take a look at this stat. There's no denying it. And it's a place where I've gotten my share of debates, admittedly, and probably too many. It probably gets beaten to death a bit. I'll admit that a bit, but it's one I'm passionate about, much like, you're probably passionate about it as well. Just that I'm a believer in what DK still has to do here. I'm a believer in his still upside that remains, I think, for him. And no matter what any person wants to not like or beyond, and it's a very small band. I want to say this too. I do this show a lot. People love DK, and the majority out there want to see DK remain a Seattle Seahawk and aren't looking to move on from him. No way, no how. But you come back through the first 5 years, a guy in Megatron who is one of those legendary looked at wide receivers in the sport. He's looked back upon as this guy that is a unicorn, that there's no one who's ever been built like Megatron. I'm not getting another Megatron. Megatron's like the one-off you'll ever get of him, this special player, just stacked up insane seasons, just put together. Oh man, first 5 years, they're pretty much on the button of each other. And one of these teams has been trying to compete to get right in the playoffs every year, has been pushing in every single ball game, do whatever they can, has at times run the ball when they've been ahead of games in a lot of games. You have versus Detroit at that time, through that first 5 years of that run, especially with Calvin, where they're behind the majority of their games. They're far behind the majority of their games. They're throwing the majority of those games a much higher percentage than they're running because they're behind as much as they are. But stat for stat, pretty damn close. Pretty damn close. And I'm not saying he is Megatron, but there's some close. It's I don't know. It's like, how does he, if he's bad, how does he get that close to Megatron? Or does Megatron just suck more than he's given credit for in the way we look at him? It's got to kind of be one or the other on that. I haven't yet heard the good explanation from those small contingent on how he's pulled that off if he isn't a really good player, a really good wide receiver. Preacher says, I think DK will be as good or better than Harrison because of a supporting cast. I think it's very, very possible in that. Harrison's going to certainly be featured a lot in that Cardinal offense. They've got Michael Wilson as their number 2 and Harrison number 1. And I mean, unless you think the Dortch man's is gonna get it done for him, he's probably going to get a lot of targets. But DK is going to, I think, be heavily worked as well. And more, there's going to be more of I'm sure you guys all heard, it was wild actually at times, but I'm sure you guys heard the Tom Brady interview there with Cowherd. And one of the spots that he brought up in that interview with Cowherd that just stood up to me when he was talking to him was about you don't want to have your number 1 wide receiver waiting 2.5 quarters to get a target. And I just kept going back to, DK. And it's like, you got to find your way to get that guy worked in. You got to find a way to get it done and have it be purposeful. And it's not been purposeful for Seattle. There are times in here and there they'll make it purposeful. Too many other times it's like an offense with its concentration in other places. Not that you can't work the other items, but you do need to make this part, as Mike McDonald is saying he's going to do. We're going to work DK. That's just what you would expect a smart coach to look at this situation and say. This isn't just coming from me and out my butt. This is also exactly what our head coach is saying about DK too. Am I thinking of a different Harrison? The payoff stream was interesting. And Duran, I definitely would say that when it comes to jump balls, it's not necessarily DK's best attribute in his game. And we'll see if that's a part of his game that, can improve a little bit better with time. It'd be a place that if I was saying stuff you could work on in the offseason, this is the place to be on at a forefront spot. And I don't know if it's been for him or not. There are moments where it does come out and you see it. It just, you don't see it as consistently, I think, as you'd like to see. And I'd like to see it more consistently too as well. I think you can still find a way to have him maximized without that having to be a calling card part of his game. But with as big as he is and as long as he is and the catch radius he has, it would seem like a natural part of his game that could grow into being there. And we've seen it at times. It's been there in a major way. You have the Eagles playoff game, first year of his football professional career, and that we set a record that game, and he jumped up at the end of the game to seal it. Goes between 2 guys and just high points it. Got the Minnesota Viking game there at the end where Russell throws a 9 route down the field and he jumps up and snags it on that one. Jaguar game with Geno Smith almost playing perfectly and went right over the top of Shaquille Griffin. Got the last year, the play with the Niners down in the 9 route, back shoulder throw from Drew Lock. It comes up at times. You just want to see a little bit more consistently there. But the fact that we at least see it in flashes does say that maybe it is a possibility to kind of start to grow a little bit more in his game. I think, as Brian also says on this draw, and some of this is going to be improved by how I think Geno is instructed to throw to DK on some of those trust throws. Because if you have a coach that worries about the interception, they're not going to want the quarterback to throw the ball on the receiver. I've long wondered about this drawing too, where it's some of these throws you get with DK where it's 3 yards out of bounds. If not, Geno had been sort of instructed, if you're going to miss here. I don't want you to miss on the player. And by asking him to not miss on the player, he's yes, maybe better protecting the ball if they're instructing him to do that. But then you're also making the likelihood of a reception that much lower because it's going to be harder of a catch than for the wide receiver. And I do feel like I'm not on a limb by saying that there was some of that being coached into how they attacked, especially down in the red zone. Where the last thing I think Coach Carroll, and maybe it was part of the Super Bowl thing, where he's like, the last thing I'm going to want to ever see again is an interception in the end zone. And Duran, he had the longest wingspan according to the combine. I think it's been beat since then, but bottom line, should be able to build it in. Brian Myers, I'm wearing the same tee as Brandon. Let's go, Brian. Let's go. It's a strong t-shirt, man. Very strong t-shirt. Isn't this the one you got me? I gotta get some new t-shirts for this year, though. I think that's what I'll do when I come back to the Seattle. Go to the mall. Get one of those Seahawks shops. Can he slump if he didn't play much this season? I don't think so. If you didn't play a rookie season, you get a pass on that, Duran. Who's the new O-line coach? I forget his name. Scott Huff, former UW guy. I'm a 12. Love your show, but the locked and loaded was a poor choice of imagery. Go Hawks. I figured I'm a 12. I figured there's going to be some people out there that get potentially triggered by it. And then I spent a long time thinking about that and wondering if I cared. And then I came back to the thing I often do come back to, which is I can't do it when if I do certain stuff on the channel, like there's got to be a line, you go to where you're like, well, I'm either going to be super sensitive about stuff and like worry about all the landmines I can step into that might make people get pissed, but I don't think that's very much fun. And I kind of go, look, if me putting a thumbnail together is going to somehow trigger somebody, when the Seattle Seahawks themselves went to the deal and took pictures there, I'm not putting guns in the guys. We're given those to play with, and they took pictures and they put it up on the Seahawks site. I don't know how what's good for the goose is bad for the gander. And I also just go, really? I appreciate loving the content, but I also, when it comes to stuff, I try to be upfront with this too. I'm a 12 because I know we're in this age a little bit where there's a sort of sensitivity scale in certain spots, and certain people are like super like, the thing I'll always say with it is I'm not that guy. I'm not the super sensitive, like I'm going to worry about is this person going to get offended by that or that person going to get offended by that? Because when you get in that range of thinking like that with that stuff, it ends up neutering all of your content because you start worrying about all the people that you're going to potentially trigger rather than the people that'll just appreciate it. And for maybe one person that might say they have a problem with the thumbnail today, I'll probably have 10 people to be like, awesome thumbnail. So what matters more, the 10 people that said awesome thumbnail or the one person that goes, I can't believe you show those guys with weapons in their hands? That was overstepping the line. I'm not saying you're saying it this way, by the way, but just that I thought about it, but then I come back to the part where I go, I don't really care about if somebody's going to be that sensitive about it. It's like, maybe my channel's not going to be the channel for you. You know what I mean? Because I'm never going to go to that level of like, that's too much for me. I understand there's things that'll be offensive, but there's stuff that's like, come on, come on. Free truth, are we even having a preseason this year? Yeah, they're having a couple games. Duran Everest Gatling gun, there was no howitzer. My bad. Shows you what a historical buff I am on that stuff. A gun that shoots a lot of bullets real fast. And Brian, I don't think San Francisco falls if they don't have any of the injuries at those key positions. But I do think if there is, as I said, like my deal, if I can give you a combination of two guys with San Francisco, and I think that the outlook on that team is much different if I give you a combination. I did the Fred Warner, Trent Williams, but we can change it up from that. You go, okay, what happens if Christian McCaffrey and Tre'Davious Ward go down? Do they have the corner depth that's really going to sustain there on that side at that point? Or, Christian McCaffrey, Bosa, or Brock Purdy and, Kittle. And we could do this a little bit. I mean, you could go, well, we'll do Seattle a little bit. Like, could you though? If I go, Geno Smith, Devin Witherspoon, there's still a team there with a lot of potential. So I don't know if I could much as play that kind of same game necessarily in Seattle part of it. So it's that top heavy part that I say that you're right about it. If they're healthy and they can maintain the ground, then then they're definitely going to be as strong as ever. I would expect them to be as strong as ever, and I wouldn't push it that way. But if they do sustain a couple of key injuries at bad positions, I think, Brian, then definitely they're going to be a little more susceptible than they've been in prior years. Kings out. It's funny you say that, Brandon. I still feel both teams will do well, but I know the Rams will flutter down because their entire defense is really Aaron Donald is gone. Yeah, and it's not to say that I'm counting on necessarily that this is going to happen too. Make sure I'm super clear on that. I'm not saying San Francisco is going to falter. I'm going to say the Rams are going to falter. If I'm going to do my prediction show tomorrow, I'm going to say, well, 49ers deserve to still be at the number one spot. They haven't lost any real major talent this offseason. They didn't have a horrendous draft. We'll see if Ayuk still remains there. This may change that outlook a little bit. And the Rams, same way. They had $57 million of dead money last year, and they made it to the playoffs and almost won a playoff game. And that's impressive. And those two teams deserve to be in that spot. But I think with both of those two teams, Donald gone, you look at both that roster of the Rams, it isn't exactly super stacked. It isn't the same place that it had been during their Super Bowl runs, let's say. It's not kind of comparative. And you go, man, there's a little bit of that riding on this player and that player. And the Niners, it's the same way. Niners is more just if they lost the two, I think that they're not necessarily going to be able to sit there and go, okay, Trent Williams is gone. We're fine. And Trent's 36, 37, and he's got injury history to him. He's played a lot of football. Guy's been in the league since Russell Okung was drafted. Russell's been out of the game for 10 years almost, it seems like. But if they maintain health, you're right. They're not falling on that side of it if it doesn't. And King, I think Aaron Donald's loss is going to be felt by the night. You could hear it in McVay's tone when he was asking Les Snead to trade up for Byron Murphy. See how you're going to get him at 16. Like if you go listen to that's what I heard with McVay. That was the voice I heard. He's like, Les, the Seahawks are going to get him at 16. And Les is like, will you quit freaking out, man? We don't do panic stuff. We don't have Donald, man. Game over, man. Why don't you just put her in charge? It's a little bit like that. So I think they can sense it a little bit that that's going to be a bit of a different defense when you don't have that game-wrecking force of the last decade to utilize in your back pocket. But just one of those two teams goes, that's a little bit of a slingshot for me. That's us using the gravitational force of a Niner Ram failing to shoot ourselves around one of their moons and fire us back to contending state. I see something like that. I don't know what happened to Nagasa. I appreciate where you come from, Nagasa. Hopefully he didn't get timed out. Save the Geese. What's with these former Detroit players saying Stafford's a Hall of Famer over Russ easily? Pretty disrespectful for someone who's been back-to-back Super Bowls and has more Pro Bowls and All-Pro. Stafford's getting his shine a bit right now. He's getting his credit, and I think that's on the back of people, I think, doing some advanced math. And I got to be honest with you, I'm a little bit Save the Geese on this a bit, and recently, not to the point of full on saying better than Russ, but I think there's an argument to be made here. I don't know even where, I probably would give Russ a bit of the edge, but I don't know where when it all is said and done. Stafford goes out and has another near MVP season this year. It might be hard not to make that argument. And I do have to look back, I feel like, and say, man, for many years, you looked at him and said Stat Padford and gave him a hard time and go, yeah, he's just like the old thing we do sometimes with Gino. Well, he is what he is. But not really building as much into account how bad that Detroit franchise was being run and how much that was impinging the quarterback position. And watching him here with the Rams, with an organization that drafts right, that's smartly coached, and seeing what they've done with him, it does have to kind of, to me, raise your measure of your outlook of Stafford a little bit in that time there with Detroit. Likewise, Save the Geese, when you do look at what Russell Wilson did when he got out from underneath the umbrella of Seattle and how it seemed to more expose him than raise him up. This is where I come back to, I know it's a little bit sacrilege on this for the Russell Wilson folks on this, but it's one where I can kind of understand a little bit of the thinking behind it. I'm not saying I agree with it, but I can get where people are coming from a little bit with that. And it's not a bad argument necessarily. I mean, Stafford, the back-to-back Super Bowls is a legit thing there, but I mean, stat for stat, yeah, so, I mean, he's got 13,000 more yards he's thrown more for than Russell has. He's got 357 passing touchdowns to Russell's 334. I mean, it's like you have the Super Bowl part you can go do and all pro, but like I'm just saying there is an argument to be made here, on that front of it. I think Stafford did come in the league a little bit earlier than Russ, so he's had a little bit more time. But again, Russ doesn't look like he's sustaining as long, and that's a part of it is the longevity factor too. It's an interesting discussion. Jack Dong says at least steroid Donald is out of the league. Yes, thank God. I know Geno Smith breathes a big sigh of relief on the back of that one. Paul Third, thank you for the $2 donation. Sorry, Paul, the late notice in the dono. I didn't see it come through. Finally going to see a game in the U.S. this year, B. Let's go, Paul. Oh, my goodness. Well, hopefully you're going to go up to Seattle and getting to see it in Lumen. That's the way to do it. But congratulations, man. It's a hell of an experience going to see a football game wherever you're going to go see it, man. I don't know. I haven't been to Europe, and I don't know the soccer stadiums. I know there's an environment and boisterousness when you get into those places, but there is something special about a football stadium in America. And again, hopefully you can see it in Lumen Field because it's just an awesome place to see the game. And I think the place is going to be pretty electric this year. It's kind of just a sense of like, what are we going to see here? A little bit of an unknown. Kind of give everybody a little bit of nervousness, energy, Hopefully have that place rocking like we haven't seen in a few years. Great news though, Paul. Thank you for the donation, and let me know, man, if you're going to get to see the game in Seattle. That's cool. God's Gang with the $2 dono says, Brandon, the graphic is sick. Good job. Thanks, God's Gang. That's where I'll come down to on this. I'm not going to hear people at times on the sensitivity stuff, and it's not that I don't think about it. But for the folks that do sometimes have the sensitivity thing get maybe triggered with me a little bit, you got to understand with a lot of time trying to be funny or trying to put, even like that thumbnail, I'm just trying to maybe put a smile on somebody's face when they look at it. I'm not trying to have any message with it. So they always say when you're trying to be humorous, you're trying to be somewhat funny on things, you got to take some risks. Risk guard. Somebody might get a little bit like, that's the risk of it, the game we got to play on this, but I appreciate you saying, and that's where I figured I'd land on at the end of it, is that there'd be some people would probably be like, but the overriding majority be like, no, it's good. Nah. That's good enough for me. King's House says, how did we get money now? Weren't we only a couple of million? The Seattle Seahawks were able to secure a little bit of extra dough from converting Draymond Jones's base to bonus this upcoming season, I believe. So you're able to bring it up by that, which is we were thinking was going to happen at some point or another. We weren't sure if it was going to be a DK move or a Draymond Jew move, but we knew somebody was going to get probably converted from base to bonus to clear the space. Herbicide says, last I heard we have 9 million. Yeah, this is the over the cap last night was at 8.5 million on over the cap. Somewhere in that neighborhood. Chris says letting Ayuk go and keeping Debo could bite them as Debo is more injury prone. Injuries in general have crippled them in the past. That's why I come back to it as a potential marker that hits him again this upcoming year. And you can see it at times with certain guys that are a little bit longer in the tooth and they have played in the Super Bowl window longer, which part of that means, of course, those guys have played all those extra games in the playoffs. And those playoff games are hard games to play. Those are tough games in the body. Those are guys selling out. And I'm a little bit thrown off a bit that they've chosen with the Ayuk route here. It does seem like the Niners haven't exactly had a plan in place for how to deal with this situation. They've known Brandon wants to be paid. They know he wants the $30 million. Reportedly, they don't want to give more than 26. But at the same point in time, we were walking into the draft and there were reports that they were just going to try to flip Debo. To me, that was the move you make, is that you sign Brandon Ayuk, you flip Debo, you get back maybe a late second round pick back for Debo. Then you take a guy like Malachi Corley, who can do all the stuff Debo could do. And then you still have Ayuk that you can't really replicate within the draft. Ricky Pearsall is not going to be Brandon Ayuk and what he brings to the table. It's a little bit odd their direction they've gone with this one. And if they do that, if they do move Ayuk, which it seems like it's getting pretty close to the place where it's hard to come back from, then yeah, you're riding on Debo's health, George Kittle's health, Christian McCaffrey's health, all guys that have had injuries in the past, multiple injuries in the past, and all guys that have had a heavy amount of use on their bodies. If those guys are still in their 20s, some of them, they're in a later hour of they've got like the 34-year-old bodies, so to speak. Strange move though by the Niners, Chris. I don't get. Ayuk's such a good player for them. He's a great route runner, can create separation, good after the catch, excellent blocker. And I'm not sure why he's the one that gets on the duck, duck, goose game. He's the goose. Kings out. This is the most optimistic I've felt about the NFC, about the West in a while. Few years. Oh, yeah. Well, definitely the two teams that are there in both the Niners and the Rams. The Rams starting to feel with Donald retirement. Stafford's not going to be too far behind him, potentially. Cooper Kupp starting to get up there. We got both of those two teams starting to look down the barrel of having to turn their things over around a little bit. And maybe that's right about the spot where Seattle will be ascending. Duran says, I really think health will be the biggest determining factor in the Hawks season. Definitely a big one. I think that one kind of, for me, I would have put it on the list, Duran, but it is one that I think you're right. It isn't huge. I think it is a bit of a go without saying, because I think any team has a major injury strike, they're done. Seattle's got, I think, a bit of an ability to deal with injuries uniquely than they have been in the past. If Boye Mafe goes down, do you have edges you can call upon? Yeah, you do. If Leonard Williams goes down, do you have a couple 3-techs you can bring inside to get the job done? And yeah, you actually do. So there are some spots that have a little bit of depth depending on where the injury strikes. But you are right in that if you have an epidemic of injuries like we've had at times in seasons past, where you're like the number one team and the amount you've been injured over the course of the year, that does end up holding you back. Certainly hold you back from being a contender. Brian Myers, Carl Lawson, or Yannick Ngakoue? Oof. I guess I'll take Carl Lawson because at least he can do a little bit of stuff against the run. Yannick's completely a no-go when it comes against we already have kind of a Yannick Ngakoue and Darrell Taylor on the roster. Chris says, I've wondered what a deadline move could be. Would Uchenna be possible trade bait? Don't want to see him go, but he's smaller than what Mike likes for the position. I think Uchenna Nwosu is only really possibly going to be trade bait if you were not in a contending state and you were in sell mode, in which case there'd be probably a couple players that would be potentially there on the block from the Seahawks perspective that a contender could come and grab. And Uchenna would be one of those guys, Chris. So it's a little bit determined by that. The only way you would, I can't see any fashion where you would look at trading him this year, though, if things are going well. Even if Derek Hall were to ascend and become a really strong player for you, I think you're still going to want to have 3 edges that you can rotate through that are all strong. I don't think Darrell Taylor is likely to be one of those guys. So you're going to need the 3 that you got that are good, and so I think that'll be probably where it goes. But if they are in its 3-3 state around the trade deadline, 3-4, 4-3, dude, is there a little bit maybe a possibility if they can get a 3rd round pick back for Uchenna or something like that? Maybe. Yeah, I can see him doing it. But probably overall small chance. Corey Coolman, Niners got Floyd opposite of Bosa. Rams made the best interior offensive line in the cards at a blue chip wide receiver in Harrison. They did. All had good off seasons, Corey. That's why I say too with this that, and part of one of my reasons is saying, what a San Fran or Rams have to falter here for us to be a contending team. And that it's part of that strength that I just don't think if you're going up against that true strength as it looks on paper purely, that the team can quite get tapped into that same state. Greg says DK's play style is ground-based like T.O., and I don't know why people just won't accept that with the jump ball talk. Nobody wastes time saying, why didn't Magic the Mailman dunk like Sean Kemp? They're all 6'9". That's a good point. It's a very good point, Greg. Yeah, it's at the end of the day, very effective player. No matter whether we like him to do the jump ball stuff or not, still doesn't mean that he isn't awesome as a player, or that the team can't still get more out of him without him having to do that. King says you should call it the C-Clips channel. That's not bad. Corey says, I want to see the Niners defense without Greenlaw and the Rams without Aaron Donald. Me too. I did think the Niners did do a good job too, Corey. They went out and got, Devondre Campbell to come in there and kind of be their hedge there until Greenlaw can come back. But that is going to hurt a little bit when he had that injury in the Super Bowl. It's going to delay him a bit. MJ Daniel says, fix the third down issues on D and the O, and I think this will be a good season. Well said. Well said. That definitely would be a big part that could help hinge on some success, is being better on both those accounts. Rodney Press Show, I think we can contend, Brandon. I also think our third down troubles will not be as big of an issue as it has been under the Carroll era. I would love to believe that's also going to be the case, and certainly on paper looks to be the case. Spread-based concepts, more of an ability at times when you get into third and four fives, those third and shorts, to have more plays to naturally be able to call upon to get those conversions, where there's even times we get into third and threes and third and fours and it didn't always feel like it was an advantage to the offense, like it often will feel like advantages for other offenses when they're playing our defense. I do have a lot of confidence in the defense's third down issues being cleaned up, because big part of the base philosophy with Coach Carroll's scheme was to keep things clean over the top. And that means we're going to play to depth. And we're going to play to depth at the cost of short routes and short completions. And that is not going to be the style of Mike Macdonald now. So simply the shifting of philosophy alone should bring about more of those third and out, 3 and outs, more of those shorter drives, more of a chance for the offense to come out there and get more done. And maybe once the offense is out there getting more done, Rodney, they're able to get into more of a rhythm because they're out there more often, rather than sometimes waiting for 3/4 of a quarter to get back out onto the football field. I think it could all come together in that way. Very good points on your guys' parts. Lord Booms says, aloha, Brandon. Aloha, TheSeahawksNest. Thank you, man. Aloha to you too, Lord Booms. Good to see you in the house. Wu-Tang Financial says, that's fine with me. Underestimate this crew and disrespect them. Hope they play with a chip on their shoulder. Me too, man. Me too. Always better with a chip on your shoulder. Any team is. Nick Guzman, San Francisco could very well not have their wide receiver 1 and not 100% Kittle to start the season. Kittle's recovery hasn't went as scheduled and has lost a bunch of weight. He did look very lean at the tight end camp. Sometimes those guys were able to just look lean and then get it right back, and professional athlete and whatnot, but he did look a little bit skinny, almost kind of wide receiver-like a bit. Herbert says, the Cards are way too young to be taken too seriously. Yeah, I still think they end up in the 4th in this division. They're doing some good things, but that was the team with the new coach coming in that had a lot to have to turn over to get right. Paul Third says other teams' fans won't know the fine details of this Hawks, and most Hawk fans are quick to dismiss other teams' fine details as homer opinions. Very true. Very true, Paul. I don't have anything to add. I think that's very true. King, I don't underestimate them at all. That's all I've said. I have more upside for the Cards than the Rams. To me. Hey, that's fair. I think the Rams losing Donald is their downfall. They don't have a defensive tackle that requires 3 dudes to block now. It definitely is going to make the difference of their defense. You can make the argument that there's been no defense that's going to be as changed and is having to kind of reinvent itself almost from scratch as much as the Rams will have to with the loss of Donald, because so much of their defensive concepts have had over a decade to be baked within to get the most out of him and to get him in the spot to allow him to really truly be as dangerous, dogged, and undetermined as he possibly could be. And now that goes away. And they do have some guys they brought in there, but Aaron Donald to Braden Fisk, this is the reason why, and you guys saw it, it's on the video from Sean McVay. This is why he wanted Byron Murphy so much. I think that's part of him making such the heavy play there to Les Snead was hey, this is going to be an issue for us. This is no small thing. This is no Braden Fisk Band-Aid will suture this wound. Only a suture will suture the wound, and his name is Byron Murphy. But Les Snead is in a super patient mode. He's obviously, start to get older. You go from being in his 30s to F those picks to, I kind of like those picks. I suppose it happens to a man when you've had 6 straight drafts without a first-round pick. Michael Arrington says, how shocking would it be if the Cardinals go from the 2022 Lions, last in the division that everyone beats up on and underestimates, to the 2023 Lions? It would be very crazy, Michael. I don't think that there's a lot of people that are saying that that's what will go down. And I do think that Gannon had a very impressive season last year. I've knocked him right and left for his shots, and some of the way that he comes off, but it's resonating with those Cardinal players. He got the buy-in last year. But on the back of that, this isn't a guy that came out and had 8 or 9 or 10 wins last year. They got 4 wins. 4 wins. And Kyler coming back, and he looked pretty good coming back, and maybe, that they'll be even stronger with him there. But it wasn't like they lit the world on fire. They were decent. And it was a strong opening step there by Gannon. But they had a long way to go with Kingsbury and when he left, and the players that they had missed on in recent seasons in the draft. And I don't think that you just turn that over in 2 years, the situation that they were within, and go, okay, well, it's good to go now. I think it's still going to take at least another year for them. But I think Gannon's shown himself to be a good coach for them, and that they're on the strong path overall. Nothing wrong being underestimated, King Zhao. I'm sure they like having that position a little bit. Reek 206 Northwest with McDonald here. I feel like the struggle of losing consistently to backup quarterbacks should be over. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Then this is one of those parts that I get very excited about. We had a defense and an offense prior, in my opinion, that did not play to the opponent, that did not attack the opponent's weakness, that instead would sometimes attack an opponent's strength because it was in the name of the team's identity. The team strong up the middle. We're going to run up the middle. The team loves to hit you with dink and dunk and just kind of slow bleed their way up the football field. We're going to play to depth. I've said very often there's a very, very particular reason why backup quarterbacks had success with Coach Carroll for about the last 5 years with this defense. And that is first and foremost because the Coach Carroll defense had been solved. And there were Seahawks beater plays that you could bring into play that would take this defense down. Concepts that there was no adjustment to be made because the team didn't make any adjustments defensively. They were going to do what they were going to do. So those concepts worked. The difference between a backup quarterback and a starter is a starter will come out there with brass balls, and he'll go out there and he'll sometimes want to push the envelope. Yeah, I know the throw to the flats there all day, but I'd really like to try to hit this post route. I'd like to try to get this down the field, and we've just been dinking it all day. They've got to finally, at this point, get impatient, allow me to go. Whereas a backup's going, anytime on the field, I need to be towing the line, doing what the coach says, because I want another opportunity to get back out here. I want to have another chance to show them that I can do this job for them. And I'm not going to do that by freelancing, because your freelancing goes bad as a backup quarterback. Guess what? You're not going to be starting too many games. So a backup comes out there against the Seahawks defense that's very simple in its approach. A Seahawks defense that's going to have that leaning towards depth with their coverages. We're going to take away the deep ball. The backup quarterback's going, hey, I don't have a strong arm anyway. Go ahead and take away that deep ball. I'm just going to sit there and throw it to the flat. So why so many backup quarterbacks could continuously go into our Seahawks defense and have the success is they weren't going to go outside of themselves. They knew who they were. They knew their role to play. And that made them effective. And that's not going to be the way it is anymore, because as we saw with Mike McDonald last year, and what sits at the forefront of his defense, among other things, is I am going to attack your weakness. I'm going to force you to do what you don't want to do. Hey, Seattle Seahawks, you got protection scheme problems? You got issues with dealing with stack fronts? I can confuse your offensive line protections by throwing stack fronts at you. Guess what? You're going to get nothing but a steady dose of that all day long. Hey, San Francisco 49ers. You want to keep simple reads here for Brock Purdy? You want to be able to just have him get the ball out of his hands as quick as possible? I'm going to set you up in situations where you're not going to be able to get that done. I'm taking that away from you. I'm taking the short routes away from you. I'm going to force Brock Purdy to have to read this defense and read it post-snap and read it fast. I don't think he can. And that's where he's just completely on the other end of this scale than Coach Carroll was. Coach Carroll had a purposeful reason for why he did what he did. It had a day where it was really effective, and he created a legendary defense with this approach. But its day had just passed, and now you need to be more to this new day and where the evolution of the sport had gone, where the evolution of people dealing with Coach Carroll's defense had gone, to kind of update your systems a bit. And we didn't update our systems. And that's why those backups year in and year out could always come in and keep giving us problems. That's why Andy Dalton threw for what he threw, 350 yards last year against us at home as a Panther. And shoot, that's the second time Dalton's thrown for 350 on you in your stadium in the last 5 years. Guy that you barely play. Why? Well, because of that. Mumbles, thank you for being a member of the Hawks Nest for 19 long months, almost 2 years. And thank you to all members of the channel like Mumbles that do show that support. We'll be doing a call-in show here shortly this month. If not this weekend, we'll be doing it next week at some point. So be on the lookout for that as a member of the channel on your community post. Thank you for that. He says, thumbnail needs more DACA. Maybe MA Deuce too. I could have gone. I wanted to go even more. I'm like, would a nuke be too much? Would a nuke mushroom be too much in the background? Do I just need to keep it to a conventional explosion? Thank you, Mumbles. Corey Coleman says the other teams in the division would have to falter for the Cards to step up, which I don't see happening outside of injuries to a Stafford and or Trent Williams. Yeah, I feel the same. Good spot. They're moving in the right direction. Overall, solid offseason. They're going to eventually have to figure out whether or not Kyler's truly the guy there or not. And they'll make that choice, I think, and decision by this next offseason. But they're doing better in the realm that they've done in recent past there with Steve Keim. King Zhao Cross has got a seriously massive. He was already agile and quick-handed, but his newly added size is looking fire. Does look like he's gotten bigger. A few people have noted that on the scene from reporter standpoint, looking at him, saying, man, he looks different. And he was a young guy coming into this league. It's that grown man strength. It's been in a weight room program for a couple of years, getting your body to that spot of things. It takes some time. We like to think in this day and age with steroids and everything going so quick that this stuff's all just easy to add, but you got to slowly build it up to get it on your body, the good weight on your body, the lean muscle on your body. And he's hitting into that right groove spot where you'd expect him to take that big step forward. Daniel Bailey says, I don't get how Woolen has tackling issues and people say he is no longer good. Sauce has tackling issues and a lack of takeaways, and yet he still is deemed the best corner in the NFL by most. Shaking my head. Not to mention what Sauce gets away with. Yeah, back spit all the way around on that one, Daniel. And that is where I say there's this, on a couple of these guys, there's a little bit of this narrative. Cross and Woolen, especially, I've saw this from last year, of this being sort of looking at their past this last season and going, it was a bad year. And overall, I was like, no, it wasn't a bad year. It was a matter of there's holes in their game. There's significant holes, and they need to be addressed to get these players to the upside that they can reach. And if they don't address them, then it's going to limit them in that upside. But doesn't make them a bad player and doesn't make them not still finding effectiveness on the field. And I think with Woolen, he probably had 3 interceptions as well on top, 3 or 4 that he had just dropped that were in his hands. He gets those picks and he gets those takeaways. People probably look at the bottom line of, he had another 5 or 6 interceptions. It was a good year. And they would totally then be overlooking those tackling issues you talk about, Daniel. So yeah, it wasn't a bad year. He's still got all of those coverage skills that we've seen. And in fact, let's also remember this with the stat that came out. I dropped a Trey Brown video. I dropped a Trey Brown video yesterday, and on the Trey Brown video, was showing you a little bit about the PFF. I know many of you are familiar with the PFF stat showing that Trey Brown was the best corner in press coverage last year when he's aligned in press. And in that video, I showed you that he only was aligned in press for about like 35, 36% of his coverage snaps, not the total snaps he played on the football field, but just those snaps that he was in coverage. Only 35% of those was he up in press. Expecting that to change. I expect that to be in a different state. To your point on this, Daniel, when you look at Tariq Woolen's season last year, and you look at the moments he was put into man coverage, much like with Trey Brown, Tariq Woolen was your highest graded corner in man coverage, not on the Seahawks, in the NFL. Tariq Woolen, best man cover corner in the NFL. But do you think, if I had you to lay a bet on black or red on this one, and I had to lay you a bet, and I told you, okay, well, Trey Brown, he only played in 36% of the snaps in press, and I was to tell you that Tariq Woolen was the best man coverage corner by PFF, do you think that he spent the majority of his reps in man? Or even close to 50-50 for that matter, versus zone? Another one where you're spending a small amount of that time actually in man. Same thing with Devin Witherspoon, by the way. Witherspoon and Woolen, I think 2 of your top 5 rated man cover corners in the NFL last year, both like that Trey Woolen stat with him in press, a small amount of the time actually in that role. This is a place that's going to be an easy adjustment and change for Mike Macdonald in this new defense. Because he, at the forefront, as I said earlier, wants to put his players in the position to do what they do best. So does that mean that I'm going to have Woolen in zone a predominant amount of time? Or am I going to have him in man? And there will always be a pull within this scheme. This goes to the Trey Brown situation as well. There will always be a pull within this scheme. Macdonald has adjusted it where he's gone to some of the off-coverage looks. He's built in more zone concepts to me than you got a little bit with Wink Martindale, where Martindale would lean so much heavily into the man base, which comes from the Buddy Ryan stuff, right? We're going to throw all of these guys at the line of scrimmage in these stacked boxes and blitzes, and then we're going to just ask our cover corner man covers, our guys on the outside to hold up. And what we're going to tell our corners is like, okay, you are on an island. You are out there by yourself. We're not giving you a lot of safety help over the top, but you only got to cover for about 1.5 seconds. That's it. And so you do need the cover corners on the outside to get that done to run that scheme, but there will always be a draw from Macdonald, even though he's gone to the zone concepts. And he did that really by necessity because those were the corners that he had. He made that adjustment versus Wink. Wink would say, oh, my starters are out. I got to go to my backups. We're running man. Cover 0. And Macdonald goes, well, I can't, if I got my backups, I can't go cover 0. I got to protect those backup cornerbacks for who they are and what their talent is. Why did the Seahawks double down on cornerbacks in this last draft when they were already sitting on a bevy of so many? Because I think this is a place that Macdonald has learned from Wink Martindale. I don't want to get myself stuck back in a place where I don't have enough corners, quality corners to put out there on the field to be able to run my scheme in every way that I want to run it against any given opponent. Specifically, to be able to go to man coverage concepts on the outside to neutralize an opponent that might struggle with man coverage concepts, like we've seen within our own division with the San Francisco 49ers, who it's being brought up more and more about some of these receivers having problems on that team at times in generating the separation in their routes against man coverage. That it's a team that does a lot of its damage against zone, and that's where they're really at their best. So Woolen's got that in his game. He's got that upside still remaining there in his game. He did not have a bad year last year. And the flashes of all pro coverage ability that he showed in his first season are still readily apparent, are still right there. This was not a flash in the pan rookie season for him. This is a guy who can still bring a lot to the table. Does have to clean up the tackling, and it's a couple of different things with the tackling. It's not just bringing the guy to the ground. It's also the willingness and want to get off of blocks, the willingness to throw his body around in there to make those tackles, to not be sometimes looking like you're protecting yourself from making business decisions. So it's a bit of both of those things with him. But the coverage skills, the ball skills, knowing that if he's playing a full season for us again this year, I'm expecting whether he takes a big step or not in the tackling numbers, he'll get you 5-6 interceptions with the way that he plays the position and with the way that they're going to lean into the man coverage concepts. The tackling just becomes the key. Corey, Murphy, and AD are different, but they have a very dense build that makes their center of gravity so low. Indeed. Yeah. Usually guys aren't that, to your point, Corey, that thick at that size and that uniqueness there. Paul Third is surprised how quickly Rams fans were to say AD was past his prime and won't be missed. Yeah, that's definitely them smoking the ayahuasca. What, did you drink the ayahuasca or smoke it? Well, maybe that's what they did, is they smoked it when they should have drank it, I guess. But the Rams are doing all the drugs. If you're trying to tell me that AD had passed his prime or was like some shell of himself of what he had formerly been. And that's not the case at all. He was maybe not as strong as ever, but very close to just about being as strong as ever. And look, AD also could come back this year. As Zach was talking about on the channel, you get the Rams into a 6-2 start. You can't tell me McVay's not going to be on the phone being like, look, you get to skip training camp. You get to skip half a season. You just come in here and chase the ring. We know Donald's going to keep himself in shape. Free True says the one thing you cannot fake is pure speed. Look to our team for that. Amen. And imagine Carroll always one man Donald with guys like Haynes, Joey Hunt, Ethan Posick, and others. Yeah. Never did commit to really a full-on double team with Donald, did we? Never decided we were willing to really cross that bridge. King's House says Murphy should blossom because he's learning from the most important player there, Jaron Reed. He even said he's doing everything Reed does. And Reed was already a pass rushing specialist as a defensive tackle, which was electric for us. I love hearing it. I meant to get that clip, and I probably should have had that clip ready for the show today, King. I'll probably try to get on the next show. But they had Byron Murphy on with KJR, or 710, not KJR. Yeah, it was ESPN, 710 ESPN. And he was talking about the mentorship going on with Seattle right now and who's helping him along. And he mentioned Jaron Reed is the kind of guiding light for him right now. And some really cool little tidbits from it. And a great guy to follow, number one. Jaron Reed's been known as an alpha guy going back to Alabama and a guy worthy of being followed in that way. A guy that also didn't necessarily have the natural twitch or explosiveness of a guy like Byron Murphy, who's had to get the most out of being more technical in his approach as a pass rusher to be effective. So a guy like that being able to then pass that knowledge down to a guy that has some of that natural stuff, it's the marrying of the best parts there to get the best out of that very talented player. But then you hear even the little detail that he gave, which was that Jaron Reed showed already Byron Murphy this little tidbit where Reed showed Murphy how to thin his stance, because his stance was a little too wide, and he showed him how to thin it up a little bit and get a little skinnier with his stance. And he said that it's made his get off quicker, noticeably quicker. He said it feels quicker. I look quicker on my get off. Just a little tidbit there that you get from a guy like Jaron Reed. And that's a bit of the part that we sometimes forget with these veterans when we want to play the hot stove league game, or we can cut this salary here and cut that salary there. There are those guys that are veterans on a roster that are providing you value sometimes beyond just what they're giving you on the football field. And that's not to say Jaron doesn't give you value in the field. He absolutely does. But it's showing already here with this mentorship of him taking this kid under his wing and helping to provide that guy that you're not going to have to learn these lessons the hard way. I'll be here to show you all the lessons before you have to learn them. So that means you're going to be able to tap into your upside as a player that much quicker and not have to go down some wrong paths to get to the right. And one of the parts and one of the reasons that it's nice to have Jaron Reed on this roster, and it's great to hear that he's providing some of that guidance for him, and it's a good guy to follow. Robert DeMars says, as fun as the new return could be, I'm interested in seeing what Jay has planned for coverage. Some big Dixon magic and scheming for long fields. I'm going to be interested too. Harbaugh coming in, and with Harbaugh coming in here and the Harbaugh family having so many really good firm roots in the special teams game, you know that he's going to do some interesting things. That's for sure. And I don't know. I think you're going to see some of that razzle dazzle here, Robert, on the special team side of it. We've seen Dixon, remember the Detroit game a couple years ago, take the fake, and we've seen him double punt. He's a guy that's not shy about doing the trick play. I know within Ryan Grubb's scheme, he loved to run the trick plays there at UW. I know he's going to be pulling on McDonald's ear to do a lot of that stuff here in the pros. So, one thing is for sure with that Harbaugh is that there's no trick as a special teams coach he doesn't know or isn't aware of or has been handed down to him through uncle or father on that one. And I'm guessing he's going to kick, scheming some stuff up is right. But I'll tell you, Robert, for me, it's the kick return game because we're getting something that I don't think we've gotten in the NFL in a long time, which is a completely new kind of play. Nobody knows what this is going to be like or how this will go. I've said that there's guys this offseason, special teamers like Harbaugh, that are just probably going crazy with the, they're in the bar drawing up all the little different nuances. We're going to pull these guys back this way, and then we'll pull these guys back this way, and then we'll create the tunnel, and we'll make it look like it goes this way. But the tunnel's going to actually be up over here on the backside, and we'll have the running back reverse his field, and he'll actually retreat a couple of yards to come back. Like all the little things that you can do on with this stuff to get creative with it. And for special teams coaches that haven't exactly been able to get creative in recent years, have they? Because you go, well, the kickoffs are removed, so there's nothing we can do with that. Punt returns are almost done because the guys that kick punts now are just too good. They have the hang time and the depth, and we just don't have an opportunity to return any punts. You just don't have any opportunities anymore. So now this opens us back up the special teams guys to become more of a part of the game, which is, I love it. I love this adjustment, Robert. It's going to be really fun. Good morning, football breakdowns. There's already a play with DK going in the slot. If you watch the video, the Seahawks posted on YouTube of Geno. That's right. That's where Geno tells, and Geno giving those signals, he says, DK, get in the slot. Because DK's already just so used to being on the outside, and Geno's mic'd up, and he's pointing everybody to get in their position. You're over here, you're over here. And he's like, no, DK, you're up in the slot here. And DK's like, oh man, I've just been on the outside for so long. But yeah, I saw that too. It's a great note there. Good morning tells JSN to go outside and DK goes in. Yeah, it was sweet. Music to my ears. Preacher says this system will take 2 years to install as a working instant thinking offense and defense. Very well could. Part of why I will definitely be preaching for patience, free truth. Definitely preaching for patience. Well, he's down grenade. So we won 9 games last year, basically last in defense and a beat up O-line. It's just now starting to turn in my head. Why do we think we're going to win 7 to 8 games this year? As Free Truth says here a little bit on this, it does come down to a little bit of just that you're taking on so much new and the turnover and the change. And you do look to historical spots across the board. What happens when legendary coaches move on from certain spots? If I go through history and I look at those coaches that are leaving programs where they've had a lot of success, but they've gone to the end point and then they've moved on, what tends to be the way that those situations play out the next upcoming year? And I think if we looked by and large at those kind of situations, we would tend to see that there's a transitional state that needs to be undertaken. But part of what I've said at the point of this whole hand grenade that I think is maybe the differing factor here than those other times and other spots and those other periods is that you have a team in Seattle that's uniquely more stacked with talent than those other teams and those other coaches taking over. And that does give them maybe more of an opportunity to get there. But you do look to the historical norms on this as you can, I think. God's Gang, thank you for another $5 donation and all of your support today. God's Gang, I really do appreciate it. He says, I feel a lot of downplay from Reek and Cross was just coaching inefficiency that had teams knowing the play before the snap. I think it doesn't help them. Yeah, I don't think it does help. Predictability on both sides of the ball was a big part of what you have to feel like holds back both of those sides of the ball. I don't remember any point in time anybody saying, look how the Seahawks offense was confusing their opponents out there for the past couple of years, and certainly not something that we said about the defense. And when it comes to Reek, yeah, you know, when you watch a lot of the completions given up against him, that he does give up, and he does give up a lot of completions, but I can show you a ton of completions that were given up against Reek last year that see him in off coverage, dropping to bail depth post snap, looking very much like he's in cover 3. And even when you're running cover 3 man match, which is you run cover 3, but if you can be smart enough as a corner, you get to man match it. If the guy runs an over route or runs the slant, you can jump the route if you can recognize it quick enough. But it's a very hard thing. It's like the gap and a half crap on a defensive line. It's very hard to do because you're asking a guy to do 2 different things at once a little bit. Stay on top, but be aggressive. Stay on top, but be aggressive. I can kind of do one or the other. And when you see a lot of the completions against Reek that were had last year, it does come about on those plays where he's dropping to depth, they hit him underneath, and he comes up and usually makes the tackle in those plays. And the struggling in the tackle spots tended to be in more of the run game, getting off blocks, making the tackle when he needed to do it. He'd be kind of the last line of defense at times and couldn't get it done. But certainly neither were bad last year on that point of it, God's gang. And it could be the case with Cross too. I know with the offense, the lack of motion, it seemed like teams at times, especially in that Ravens game, they knew what was coming. KJ Wright spoke about this a lot, and I think he wasn't BSing. And I think he took a lot of heat from Brian Carroll from saying this stuff, but teams knew what was coming. He knew he'd watch the Hawks offense on a Sunday and he could know what the play was going to be. And if that's going to be the case where play after play after play, a guy sitting on his couch who's done playing the last couple of years, but can do that, I think you're in a troubled state. So it's certainly something that would impact the players. How much we'll see this year, but these things are going to be part of those advantages I talk about. And there's many of them on this table that are going to be no longer left on the table. They're going to be picked up and they're going to be utilized. You're good in man coverage. Guess what? You're going to be in man coverage a lot. You're good in press. Guess what? You're going to be in man coverage a lot. You were super predictable before. Guess what? Now you're going to be as unpredictable as absolutely possible. That will be at the forefront. And this may bring about, as we talk about, is the theme of this show right now, God's gang. This is part of the things that bring about the potentiality for this upcoming season to be a season where your Seattle Seahawks actually contend. Not just good, not just a little bit better than last year, but actually contend. A team that's willing to run to the outside edges, a team that's willing to use fly sweeps, a team that's willing to target the middle of the football field, a team that's willing to run stack fronts, a team that's willing to blitz, a team that's willing to disguise their coverages from what you see pre to post snap, a team that's willing to use pre-snap motion at the forefront, and motions and adjustments on the offensive line prior to the snap in particular in order to get the defense to show their hand. All of these little built-in advantages to be picked up upon that aren't hard things to onboard. To go from being a 32nd, 28th, 29th blitz rate team to being a 16th blitz rate team, that doesn't take the coach doing a lot of brilliant things. It just takes a willingness to blitz a little bit more, a willingness to be a little bit more risky on what you have going on in the back end. Not being as protective in your nature. Risk adverse in your nature. Does this bring about the quick returns at that point? Does this take this team to a place where they can truly come back the next year and provide contention? Maybe. And if it happens, it will be on the back of utilizing these things that have long been sort of cold in the Seahawks, on the Seahawks advantages, So it's like the movies where you see the guy go and he's about to go into battle. This is great for the theme of my thumbnail. It's going into battle, right? It's just it's a stock movie trope we've all seen many times. He's coming up and he's usually in a hotel room and for some reason he's laid out all of his weapons on the bed and he's trying to pick the weapons he wants. And it's like in recent years, we're sort of going, okay, I'll take the shotty and I'll take the Beretta and then we go. And then there's all these others that are still left there. There's a whole rig of ammo here. There's a rocket launcher over here. And we're out. And you go, dude, why don't we take all that? If it's just here for us to pick it, we'll just carry it with us. We got a car. We just keep it in the car. I think this coaching staff is going to do a lot more of that, God's gang. And hopefully gives these players a little bit more of an ability to be better and that you're giving them more advantages to work with than we have in the past. It's less reliant on them just simply being better and more aligned, them being better, but then we doing our part to help them be better. It goes hand in hand. It's not just simply one or the other. But thank you, God's gang. I thank you for the donation on that. And both those two guys, I think, will have, not that they had a bad year last year, but an even better year this year. Kings Owl, Trey Brown is worrisome because like Kobe Bryant, they both are talented in their ways, but knowing this, the new Hawks way, one of them could be trade pieces down the line if both Woolen and Spoon combo hit. It's a good point. First world problems. You've got too many good corners. You drafted 2 corners. You like them coming into camp. You're already sitting on Michael Jackson, and you got Trey Brown, and you got Woolen and Witherspoon, and you just somebody's got to go. Can you find a trade partner out there at that point for one of these guys? It is possible. There's an argument to be made that maybe with Trey Brown, you have him at his highest possible value it's been in a trade since he's been here in Seattle, and that you're not planning on making him a long-term part of the team no, we're not going there. We're not going there. You're not planning on making him a long-term part of the team here on the outside because, maybe just doesn't fit to you on what you exactly want to get from the position. especially because you got just drafted 2 guys, and I think ideally they'd like to have one of those guys probably round into a potential starter down the road for them. So he's a possible king, both those 2 guys. I don't know if there would be any value there with Kobe, but I could see Trey Brown being somebody that a team looks at and they're going, look at how good he did in press last year. We'll bring him here. We'll just ask him to press like hell. I could certainly see something like that happen. Kitty. God's Gang says Mafi takes the next step this year, 13 sack season. That's what I see as well, God's Gang. I see that exact year coming out of him. Not a TJ Watt, Miles, he ain't going to get to that spot of things, but a 13 sack year, yeah. Swedish Shinobi says, I never noticed that GIF notification of Sharps, Super Cyan, Stiff Arm before. Epic and goated. Yeah, I've been having some fun with After Effects. And so this year I'm gonna have some I'm going to have some of these transparent videos put together like this one with Charbonnet. So when you guys donate this year, we're going to do this one's going to be one. I'm probably going to have the Bobo one-handed catch one done. But I had to put this one together. And at some point, I'm going to figure out how to make it to where the defender he hits here explodes. But that's the next level of After Effects, where you make the guy number 42 just blow up into pieces. But thank you, man. I had fun playing around with it. There's some cool things you can do with this After Effects stuff now. It's pretty next level. It's pretty next level. They make it a lot easier, a lot less of the have to hand frame stuff. Thomas Cox says, while I love DK, I feel JSN will be special and could become better than people think. This is no knock on DK. And it had an eye not cut out. I think the rest of you were going to say there. No, I don't think that's a knock on DK. It's part of being high on this team is that you have a lot of talent across the board. You're not just, we got one receiver and we got this one other guy's kind of old and he's almost broken. You got some quality guys out there. And JSN has been star this offseason and a guy that they're raving about at OTAs. And there was a reason he was the number 20th pick overall in the first round. It wasn't by happenstance that he was the first receiver taken in that draft. And so I think he's still got a lot more to show. And it'll help Thomas. Certainly will help matters when you're not making 1/3 of his targets behind the line of scrimmage. King Zal says, remember Doug Baldwin? Yeah, that's going to be JSN this year. Let's go. I do agree with you, King. I think he's up around 900 yards. Maybe pushing right up around that 1,000 spot. Getting close. He gets the opportunity. Lord Boom, Maffei's going to kill it. I think Uchenna is going to be our sack master this year. I got him at 15 sacks this year. Let's go. Boy, if you got 15 from Uchenna, 13 from Maffei, you feel pretty good about how that defense is probably looking if those guys are pulling those numbers. Greg Camp, Brandon. And I always say when you compare DK and Megatron's numbers, the first 5 years, you have to remember that Tyler has led the team in targets 4 of those 5 years, which makes it that much more impressive. I forgot that part, Greg. Let me mention that another time here on this. When you look at those first 5 years between these two guys, and I show you that stat, and I show you how close these guys are aligned to each other, and it is that way. Every one of those 5 years, in the first 5 years of Megatron's career, he was the most targeted receiver on that Lions team. Whereas Greg just said with DK, he's put up that same production while 4 of the 5 years of the first 5 years of DK's career, Tyler Lockett has led the team in targets. Very impressive. Makes it that much more impressive. Shows that he's done it on an efficient basis too, Greg. Chris says, speaking of pressing questions, I'm still wondering who's going to host Between Two Balors, since we are balorless now. He can do it on my channel if Nick's down. I'll reach out to him, see if we can and get some of those connections. I'll help him out with some of the questions too. That'd be fun. Actually a good idea. Maybe I'll see what's up with him. Still got some pull. Detail oriented. We have an easy enough schedule at the beginning of the season to build confidence and then cruise from there. I'm telling you, Hawks will be formidable this year. The team nobody wants to face. I think that's a great way of putting it. And just to show what a smart comment that is, detailed. These are my list of items that I had to happen if we were going to get a contending team this year. Just the individual items I think that have to be a part. If we're looking at this team at 12, 13 wins, we're saying these things happen. Kenneth Walker was maximized. DK was maximized. The offense explodes. But one of those details within there, to your point, is this: a hot start to the season detail. There is room to go out there and make some things happen through the early part of the schedule, to give yourself that breathing room, to give yourself the position to be able to have some room for error through the second half of the schedule. So I 100% agree. 100. Sweetie says Pumpkin does not look amused. Yeah, she's right now doing this thing where she makes me super nervous and just walks around me in circles until she gets my attention because she's trying to get me to hold her like a baby right now. I'm trying to avoid it, but she's very insistent. She has her ways. She's down. She'll be back up. She's restless. The Young Bido game. No one should be triggered by the thumbnail. I knew I would get a comment or two, but I was like, then I just said, I can't do it. You're either in two lanes with it. You can either kind of lean into that stuff where you're like me and I got to be allowed to play this in a little bit of the gray zone sometimes. You know what I mean? That's the gray zone. Trigger's also not the best reference. Probably not, but it's how I feel with it. It's like, let's have some fun. JDM just laughing out to him and looking like the took off. Oh, hell. Oh, shoot. JDM got me with that one. Lordy. Christian Gonzalez will be good in New England, King Zhao. Does got to come back after that ACL, but he did tear it pretty early, so he should be back to probably pretty full health by the start of the season. Detail oriented, DK, JSN, Tyler, not to mention our backfield. Add to better use of our tight ends. Grubb is going to maximize this offense. I see top 5-7 offense incoming. Call me Homer if you want, but it's going to happen. I love it. Let's go, Detail. Hey, that's the theme of this show today. Nothing wrong with having starry eyes today on this show, because that's our discussion. We've had a lot of shows this offseason about being patient and discussions about letting this process be on board and not jumping to conclusions with this new coaching staff to give them the rightful opportunity to truly embed and put their system into place. But with that said, the show and the theme of the show today is that there is a potential here with this team to be so much more in the first season because of the collective level of talent that you're bringing to bear. It's a unique situation for a new coach to walk into. King's House, Gardner generally holds way too much. Not even Richard Sherman held that much early in his career. No, he didn't. Sherman leaned on physicality. Sherman could play on that line. Gardner plays over the line. Every highlight I watch of Gardner, we could go look at Sauce Gardner highlights on YouTube. And if I took the YouTube of the highlights and I showed you the all 22 of it, just took the YouTube away, and here's the all 22 of that exact play, I'm going to show you him grabbing the guy up the football field. It's blowing me away. I don't know why he got that sort of open door in this league walking in where he just got to get away with it. But he just got that benefit of the doubt. Maybe it's because he's got a cool name or something. Kevin O'Connell says, Christian McCaffrey about to be ran to death this season. My man's had a lot of touches in his career. Let's look up right now. You tend to hear that at about 2,000 touches collectively for a running back, that's the spot where they hit in their career where you're in troubled territory. 2,000 total touches. If you get to 2,000 total touches, that's where guys tend to break down. Now, he is only 28 years old, but 28 years old tends to be the cliff spot as well for running backs. That's as young as that still is. This is just what history tends to tell us. So with Christian McCaffrey, you have a guy that has 1,300 carries on his body professionally. He's got an additional 500 touches. This is just during the regular season. So that's 1,800 touches during the regular season. In the postseason, he has an additional 137 more touches in the postseason. So we're about 1,900 total professional touches for Christian McCaffrey. And that 2,000 touches thing is with college included. That's the marker that they tend to tell you, the analytic folks tell you that that's where the drop-off happens. So he's already at 2,000 touches before we've even looked at what he did college-wise or how much he had to deal with college-wise as far as how much he was worked. In college, 3 seasons in college, he had somewhere in the neighborhood of about 550. So about 640 touches in college in addition to that. So Christian McCaffrey's about 2,500 touches. He's 500 touches past the marker of what they tend to tell you is where the back goes and starts to have that dip click in. Now, maybe you can push it past and further than other typical backs have been, but you can't take away from the fact that usage, we saw this with Sean Alexander even. When it hits, it doesn't kind of softly hit. The guy doesn't just sort of dip down a little bit. It's a cliff, and it drops completely off when it does click in. Paul Third says, wasn't last year one of the first times the Seahawks weren't one of the most injured teams? Yes. And even still with that team, Paul, you had the offensive line injury epidemic. But yeah, last year was actually one of the rare plus sides overall, I think, or better than they had been. We still, I think, we're probably top 10, Paul, but not, to your point, as we had been typically like top 3-ish in some years. Sean McVay's tears is going to wear his hair gel out. Ahoy's hand grenade. Well, B, it looks like we're not going to be able to get Trevor Lawrence anytime soon as he signed an extension. Yeah, that sucks. Definitely would have been all over that as an option. It's weird watching that whole discourse undertake right now because you have the people that go, well, Trevor Lawrence sucks. He hasn't earned that extension. What's he deserve? Done deserve that. And then you have people come back and go, look at all the drops and how much his wide receiver core sold on him last year. And then the discussion turns another page because then you have people coming out saying, oh, well, it's because he throws the ball so hard. You know, it's like he's not throwing a catchable ball. It's too much velocity on it. It's like, oh my gosh. He's a good quarterback though. Receivers need to catch it. Detail oriented. I hope Murphy points at McVay when we kick Rams' butt and says you should have traded to get me. And then when he does that, King, or detailed when he does that, then McVay turns right around and looks up to the press box, the Rams press box and Les Snead. So it's kind of like a domino. Murphy looks to McVay. McVay looks to Snead. One smile, 2 frowns. Hand grenade for us has a bad year. Pittsburgh, his shot at the Hall of Fame is done. Probably is. Yeah, he needs another, at least one more legit year, I think, to get himself there. Michael Arrington, was it true that y'all would have possibly taken Bo Nix to develop behind Geno? Hadn't heard much to that, Michael. It's possible, but I hadn't heard a lot on that one. I think the Hawks I think they came in understanding probably by the time that the draft came in that there was going to be the quarterbacks taken ahead. Because even if Atlanta passes on Penix, I still think they take Penix, does the Raiders. So he still ends up going. And I think the Hawks, I mean, I was certainly counting on it. I had him. I mean, it's to the point that I have it in my pre-draft. I think I had like my final 3 mock drafts for the NFL. I had Bo Nix going to the Broncos. It's kind of like it was too much of a fit that you could see happening. So Hawks would have had to have known that they were going to trade up to go get Nix, and I don't think that Seattle was really looking to do that. I think they kind of circled around the defensive player thing pretty early on because I think that they understood that they were going to get the way this was going to drop out to them was going to provide them with a really good defensive player. Just the way that it was going to play out. Chris, is a lot of what Russ went through was mental his first year in Denver, I think. Brought on by expectations and a coach who didn't know what the F he was doing. He had late season injuries, but I think it was mental. It is. It's also a little bit of the playing on time and on script stuff. And I think he's trying to transition to that a little bit in the late hour of his career at this point. And that's a hard thing to transition at this point too. It's sort of like he needed to be kind of doing this onboarding process through his 20s. But he could find some effectiveness, as I said, this year with Pittsburgh. He's going to a really good situation that's going to do the opposite of that now with him, Chris, where they're going to utilize him the right way. They're going to put him in the right positions. If he can find success again, he's gone to the right place to find that success, if it's possible to have happen. Which very well may be. Running Drew. Brandon, what do you think about Hayden Hatton? He's a good big target. The change of direction is a little bit laborious. The route running is not the best. He's an explosive guy that can go up and get it, high point of ball, big catch radius, really strong, soft hands, strong and soft hands, strong and soft. So he's got a bit of both. That stands out. He can win like hell in contested catch situations, but he is going to be a practice squad guy and a developmental guy. I don't know if he's got much really long-term future in the NFL either. I think there's going to be a little bit of a lack of an ability to change direction, a lack of ability to route run, but very effective this past year too. Chris says, I don't think the Broncos have their quarterback yet, but I'm also not a fan of Peyton. Kind of thought they'd have drafted Penix. At least it wasn't JJ. Yeah, it seemed like they just were in love with Nix. And you heard, I think, that they liked Penix. I think both those two guys would have fit Peyton's scheme. I think I could see him liking them both. Chris says, we played the extreme version of zone, as in wait for the opponent to come to you. Oh, Lordy. Ryan Myers just gave a record contract to a UFL O-lineman. Huh. Well, they're trying to get some reinforcement there. I mean, that was the big problem with them last year on top of losing Rodgers, was you just didn't have pass protection. And I do think they did draft someone, but trying to reinforce it. Smart on them. King Zhao says Woolen had knee surgery before playing last year. That what honestly hit the numbers, so he slowed a bit. But this year, I think he'll also explode. I think he had a bit of a shoulder thing going on too throughout the year, King. So it may have been both those things kind of affecting him. Certainly, you're dealing with one injury and it's kind of hindering you. Two injuries is just really going to be problematic. John Thompson, as long as Lucas is healthy, then the offensive line will be fine. He's the guy that I started with, Sean. Him and then Cross were the 1-2 at the beginning of keys to winning this year, keys to contending this season, is having those two guys as the pillars. The Seahawks offense was nothing short of awesome through 10 games, not last year, but the year before. And why? Because you had Lucas and Cross at their most healthiest they've been since they've been here in Seattle. And that was them as rookies playing that well. We can get them now into year 3 back at their health. I think you can really lean on that as a linchpin of this offense. Well, he's hand grenades. No more playing 5 yards off, please. You don't like that? You don't like him playing 5, 6, 7 yards off and then dropping to bailed depth post snap? Over and over and over. Besides, center and guards are going to be important to kind of pay attention to. One thing we've done that is nice is I think we are at least more talented at those places than we've been in years past. I think there's been a supreme limited upside to the nature of how we've set it up in years past, where at least now there's some upside to the positions. But question marks? Yeah, still question marks there. Yeah, it's a Hoyas hand grenade brings up something that there was an interesting discussion presented about this recently. Rumors are breaking here that the owners are in discussions right now about talking about a potential quarterback salary cap, that these contracts have gone so crazy, that they've gone so over the top, that they are pushing the envelope so beyond what the owners find to be okay, that it's drawn the owners into a position of believing that we'll have a separate salary cap for a quarterback. And all I've got to say to that is, yeah, I think this is absolutely the way that this should go. I think that the numbers on these quarterbacks have gone out of control. You're not paying for oftentimes what you're getting. You're being more held hostage to the situation sometimes as a franchise, to where it's the fear of losing the guy more than the wanting of keeping the guy that ends up overriding your decision-making factor. It can sink franchises when it goes wrong, as we've seen with the Deshaun Watson contract and what that may end up doing to them, or the Russell Wilson contract with the Denver Broncos. And it's continually going up in this direction that's getting more and more extreme. So the NFL taking a little bit of this away from the quarterbacks and stopping this, I think, is a much better way for the NFL to go here. It's fair for the players because these quarterbacks are the same quarterbacks that can play sometimes 15, 20 years. While these other positions like running backs, as I just showed with McCaffrey, you've got about a 4-year stretch if you're lucky. Yet that guy's got to be paid at a penance of what this guy gets to be paid with a longer career. That's not fair, and that's not right. And I think the owners would be smart to try to fix this. On top of, I think it would make the game more interesting to being able to have teams not be as held, and again, hostage is the word I'll use, held hostage by these quarterback contracts and what it then does to these franchises and their ability to build a team and build a contender. So smart move by the NFL if they're taking the steps to do this. And in my opinion, long overdue. Michael Arrington, favorite Seahawks player of all time? It's the guy over my shoulder right here, over my right, Mr. Largent, the man, the myth, the legend. He will be my forever one, probably. Too good. Too good. Sean Thompson says, another awesome show, Brandon. Thank you, Sean. I appreciate that. I'll be a little bit away here for till next Wednesday. Unfortunately, we're this house I'm renting in here. They discovered after we moved in that there might be some termites here, so I'm going to be getting this place tented and living out of a hotel for the next 4 days. So we'll be back next week with another one. But I wanted to get one out here before I had to go, and appreciate you guys all turning out tonight. Please do hit that like button if you guys get a chance. John Thompson says, how many wins does Pumpkin like for the Hawks this year? We're going to have to do the Pumpkin prediction show. It's about due. So I got to line it up. I've not checked with her yet. She did kind of sell on us last year. She had us at 12 wins last year. We only got to 9. But I still believe that there's psychic powers in this cute little brain. Nothing that is this cute could not possess psychic powers. That's all I'm saying. She knows the mysteries. Look at that. There are mysteries residing within that dome. Look at that orange melon. Look at that orange melon. I got to do that, though. I got to do the pumpkin prediction show. Yeah, we're going to have to do the pumpkin prediction. I got to get the salmon treats out. We got to find out what's what. I make big plays. What's your over-under for DK unsportsmanlikes this year? Not a DK hater. He's my favorite on the team. I think you're going with a little bit more of a regimented situation here with Mike McDonald. I think that the pro player-friendly nature of things, the lack of sometimes bringing down the hammer when the hammer needed to be brought down, is going to be removed. I don't think Mike McDonald's going to have some of the same issue that Carroll has with that. You know, the thing that we heard about with DK's unsportsmanlike that got kind of reported widely last year when it was brought up is, DK would be talking about it. He's like, yeah, they show it up as a number in the meeting on the board. It's just a number on the board to me. And I'm sure at some point Carroll sat down with him, but it's again the guy sitting down and saying, hey man, come on, big guy, we got an issue. We just got to, versus the guy that comes in and goes, this is how we're going to do this here. You're not special. You're not held up. You're not going to be in this place. And I think there's more of a chance McDonald's able to get him on that understanding. You don't have that exact same kind of freedom here that you might have felt like you had prior. So I would say I would take the under. I'd take the under 2. Definitely 2, but I'll take the under 2. Or we'll go under 3. So no more than 2. And that's okay. Chris says, do a super chat effects of pumpkin attacking random things. I could do that. Let's lean into the cat channel, dude. 3 hours says, I could see Murphy could easily be a TFL machine. Maybe double digit TFLs for sure. 5 to 7 sacks, 10 to 13 tackle for losses. I could see it. Yeah. He's got the game and the ability to do it. Ricardo, I'm skeptical Murphy gets more than 5 sacks. Not that he'll be bad, but he's going to play the interior more than often. Yeah. I think you're right. Snap count thing more than anything else. He's not going to just be starting out there running 100% of the snaps. He'll be backing up Williams. And he'll get his run, but not the same kind of run as you'd get if he's just pure starter. Always hand grenade. B. Get Seahawkers podcast Brandon and call it between 2 Brandons. Pretty good, man. I like that. Lord Boom says the same people who are triggered by the thumbnail, also the same people that think we should trade DK Metcalf and say that Geno ain't the guy. Just an observation. I'm with that, Lord Boom. I'm with that. King Zhao, I don't know Brandon. He probably had another 2,000 touches hidden under the Panthers stat line. At minimum, he was involved in about 85% of that offense. Seriously. They used him a lot. They were like, we picked you in the first round. That's how it is with those teams when they get that first round running back. Like, all these people told us we shouldn't do it. You were going to validate this selection. I'm just going to run the rock. No, you will run the rock and you will catch the rock and you will, I'm part of the team here. Yeah, but you're a first round running back. Validate. Holy Singer posted the name of the channel. Check them out when you get a chance. Brian Myers says CMC will be the outlier on that carry number. Dad taught him how to take care of himself. Definitely could buy that. I will say his dad got beat up. Kind of his body got kind of broken down at the end there a little bit, but CMC certainly does take top of the marks, take care of himself, and he doesn't necessarily have anything that's been a super major injury come up. So maybe he will be that outlier. And there have been. Always had a great day. I was just looking for, you're speaking of them. Sorry. Although that comment was when you were talking about San Francisco. That was the first time they weren't one of the most injured. Oh, I'm sorry. And I seen a graph. They lead in the last decade in injuries. Remember CMC playing quarterback in the NFC Championship game. That's right. They've had some problems at their time. Sorry, I misunderstood you on that, Paul. But yes, Niners have had their share of years like we've had that they've been a very highly injured team. And one place where you look at this, Paul, and you go, well, how do you predict that? Because you'd think there'd be a year-to-year variance in it. There would. But I think there is one measure that's an easy one to more predict on this, and that is age. Older teams will tend to be more injured. And when you have certain centerpiece players that are, getting older, and Trent Williams is old for the left tackle position. George Kittle's getting old for tight end position. Even a guy like Christian McCaffrey that's not necessarily old at 28 years old, but with 2,600 carries on that body, it's, if he's kind of in that dog years thing. Like with the dog's 9, but in dog years, he's 62. And so this is where that prediction goes, to where there's a much more of that likelihood of that thing potentially happening when you have guys like that are at that point in their career they're at. Not counting on it, not hoping for it, but just saying, we're to get to a contending state. This is something that probably would have had happened amongst a few other things in those items. Boy, Stan Grenades says Christian McCaffrey in the cover of Madden. You know what that means, everyone. I know. I got my voodoo doll right over here right now. And pre-order the copy already. He's out. There's been a couple that have been able to shuck the Madden curse. Boy, Stan Grenade, I take Dak for sure, not for $60 million though. It's going to be his cost. Looks like the Cowboys are going to be willing to play this game of chicken and let him reach the market. I think that when I look at the situation, the NFC East just tends to be a very incestuous division. I don't know why, but they just always pluck from each other, their players. Saquon Barkley going to the Eagles, for instance. There's something to me that just feels like Dak going to the Giants. That's the one to me where Cowboys pass, Giants go, well, we'll take him. Giants not happy with Daniel Jones. Giants don't have a pathway at that point necessarily to getting their quarterback they like. They bail on Daniel Jones. They spill his money over to Dak and pay him all the dough. That'd be my prediction. Mythic R's is off topic, but what do you think about Metallica? Metallica. And tonight. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Black Album, back in the day, obviously bought that one, no doubt about it. I had not been, when I bought the Black Album, so much of the early stuff was so heavy and so right in that metal pocket. I wasn't really a metalhead guy. I like rock, but I only go so far into the metal stuff. And so some of their metal stuff I've more appreciated a little bit as I've gotten older, the early Metallica stuff. They did go a little bit more into the kind of poppy-ish stuff as they went along there after that. And they didn't really, some of their stuff after the Black Album it was a bit of a mixed bag for me on that stuff. But they're okay. They're not like a favorite, but they're definitely a band that I like a lot. And I listened to that Black Album back and forth a ton over a summer. I had that thing going back and forth. One is still one of the all-time greatest songs ever written. One of the hardest songs ever written. Just was listening to that the other night. That thing is freaking timeless. Chad Wamba Bolt says, you got any more inside information about how Lucas's knee injury is doing? Is it healing? It's a great question. We don't have any certainty necessarily that I can point to and say, well, we got this going on, but I can show you this. And we got a little Instagram here of him lifting. And so you can see here up over my left shoulder here that we've got Lucas doing deadlifts, and he's not doing it with particularly light weight, by the way. So it's not like he's just over there just getting back on his knees, just getting his legs back. He's taking on pretty good weight here for these dead leg lifts. But this would seem to be a pretty good indication that he's feeling a little bit better. I mean, it's not certainty there, Chad, for you. As Dan Viens noted on this as well, you can see he's not got any knee brace on there, on the knee. So something that makes you feel a little bit better about it as well is that the brace isn't there. So maybe the surgery did help and he's ready to come back. Paul says Dak Prescott, 72% of his career touchdowns against teams with losing records. 25% of his touchdowns are just against the Giants and Commanders. So overrated. Would be eaten alive in the NFC West. I wouldn't want to go for Dak Prescott. I wouldn't want to give Dak Prescott $40 million a year, much less the $50, $60 million that he might be getting by next year. I do feel that he's a quarterback that feels right, Paul. That stat feels right to the eye test as well. And yeah, don't want to do it. That's also why I think the Giants will end up signing him, is he's been beating their butts and he's making them think he's probably better than he is. Stephen Coleman says Byron Murphy is going to be a big hit. That guy is going to be a beast. Boy, is he ever. Boy, is he ever. AI. I don't think we upgraded the line enough. Maybe next year. 10 picks next year with comp picks. According to the comp pick site that's out there, AI, they're predicting that we're only going to get 2. So that seems to be where we're at right now with all of the offshoots, is 2 comp picks, which puts you to 9 total picks. Probably a 4th, 5th rounder in next year's draft is what we're looking at. Fair points on the offensive line. It's the position that I wanted to see the Seahawks really hammer this offseason. You have signed Laken Tomlinson. You've drafted Christian Haynes and Saatea Umea. And you signed Nick Harris. That's not exactly making that the forefront or centerpiece of an offseason. Is it going to be, or in George Fant too, is it going to be good enough? We'll see. But could it be still a hindrance? Could it be a problematic spot still on the team? Maybe. I think it is in a better spot, AI, than it's been in recent years, both from a starter standpoint and from a depth standpoint. But does that equate out to a better overall line? We'll see on how they play. Mythic R, thank God. I really hope the quarterback salary cap takes effect. I do too. I don't like it in the game. I think it creates problems in locker rooms between quarterbacks and players. It separates them in a way that's not helpful. There's already natural separation because there's so much on their shoulders. But when you start making the guy more than double the highest paid player of any other guy on the roster, I can't see how that doesn't at times create some animosity, especially when that guy's not holding up his end of the bargain or perceived to not be holding up his end of the bargain. It would be very smart for the NFL to go down this realm, I think. Michael Harrington says, shaking my head, I wish we had that. It's never good to be the team that has to be the team that takes it on the nose, Michael, to then have a new rule enforced. So I dropped a video on the channel a couple of weeks ago on a Chad Brown interview I was doing. We're discussing a spot in Seahawks history back in 98 where an awful call, a call that the refs completely missed, caused the Seattle Seahawks to miss the playoffs, caused multiple people to get fired, new regime to be brought in. And it also caused replay to be partially what helped to cause replay to get re-implemented. And maybe Michael Harrington, your Russell Wilson contract is a forerunner for part of what draws this quarterback salary cap situation to be brought into effect. And that part sucks, but they just got to get this part right because no team should be held hostage by a quarterback contract. That shouldn't be allowed it just shouldn't be a part of what you have to do in building your team. It's hard enough to build a team as it is without taking that part into account as well. So hopefully the NFL does and goes down this road with it. And I think that fans would love to see it too. Emotional damage. Chad says, yeah, I saw that in my alert. And no joke, it's a long time coming. Quarterback cap. This is where I come to, Chad. I think everybody in fandoms is pretty agreeant that, yeah, there should be a cap. To hell with them getting paid more than the other players. These guys, I'm sorry, quarterbacks are the most protected player on the field, and you can barely touch them anymore. These guys should be getting paid more than to double that of the guys that are laying their bodies on the line. That don't add up. Brian E says, not to mention the cap room, it eats up to fill holes in other positions and sometimes numerous ones. Yeah. Yeah, it causes teams to make stupid choices and gut their teams, and you see it all across the board. You're seeing it with potentially the Niners. They want to move Ayuk. Oh, they don't want to move Ayuk. They know they got to pay Brock Purdy $50 million in another year, $55 million another year. The price keeps going up with every new contract signed. Tua's going to sign his, and bam, goes up even more. So yeah, it's not good for the sport. It's not for the betterment of the sport. These quarterbacks are making this money. It's only the betterment of the quarterbacks. Not the fans, not the teams. And if that's the case, then let's regulate this. Mythic says, what kind of season do you think Tarika Stan Woolen will have this season? All-Pro, maybe? I think the All-Pro is going to be a hard one. I think the only way for Woolen to get to an All-Pro season is he just has to have an incredible amount of interceptions. He'd have to have like 9 interceptions, I think, to get to kind of an All-Pro space. Sort of like Deron Bland last year, where you have so many picks that just it's undeniable not to give you that nod. I think the tackling stuff is always a little bit of what will be an issue there with Woolen. He is a bigger guy at the cornerback position, so he's got a little bit of some natural size that can work in his favor to become a better tackler, and he is new to the position. But some of being an All-Pro or second-team All-Pro would probably also hinder on him making tackling not a huge detriment of his game, that it at least gets up to somewhat of a kind of a maybe middling state, and with his upper-level coverage abilities, that would be enough to then propel him. But if he's going to tackle at the current state that he's been at the past couple of years, Mythic, that's too much of an inhibiting factor because teams can attack it, they can go after it, and you see him sometimes susceptible to some of that stuff. And even going back recently and watching some of the tape as I have on our defense last year, there's just some snaps there where he's not getting off blocks, he's not putting out the right amount of effort on tackles, and that stuff's got to improve with it. The want, the will, along with the technique has got to take a step forward. But the coverage skills, the taking the ball away, the stuff that's the most important for the cornerback to do, he's got that stuff down pat. There's no worries on that part of it. Brian says, Pumpkin's still looking at the rosters and injuries. She is. She told me that she felt like she made the predictions a little bit prematurely last year before she had a chance to really take a look at some of the post-draft process and some of the college tape on some of these guys to do better projections. And I thought that was a valid point on her part. So I'm going to give her a little bit more time. Besides, you can look at her. She's exhausted. AI says these quarterback contracts are 20% of the cap. They shouldn't be more than 12 or 13%. It's ridiculous one person makes that much more than everyone else. 100%. 100%. And as you say, AI, I think this is something, there's a unanimous feeling out there in regards to this. It's ridiculous. It's not right. It's not right on a lot of different levels. And it doesn't make the sport better that you have it set up this way. Brian says DK's penalties are not anywhere near the problem people think. No, they're not, Brian. They don't bother me either as well. Not at all. Michael says, I see an unsportsmanlike conduct call in week 1 when he goes up against Patrick Surtain. It's possible. They had a good battle 2 years ago in that in that opening week matchup, Michael. DK got him a couple times, but I think Surtain got his. It was kind of a good back and forth battle that week. Chat says, hey, I came in late. You got anything on the Ayuk contract thing, especially with them picking Parasol in the first? I think the Parasol was definitely a little bit of a canary in the coal mine, Chad. If not that, then the Juwan Jennings contract extension certainly should have been. Not that they gave Juwan Jennings a lot of money, but if you're looking at a position from the Niners standpoint where we desperately want to keep Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk, well, you just drafted Parasol in the first, and then now you're going to sign Juwan. Couldn't a little bit of that money have gone back over to Brandon Ayuk instead? And I think that's them showing a little bit in advance their hand on this situation, being like I put on my channel with my Clips channel, where it's a duck, duck, goose, where you have 3 guys you're looking at if you're Lynch or Shanahan, depending on who's really in control here. And he's looking at these 3 guys and he says, okay, here's our parameters. Next year, as we stand right now, we are $38 million of dead money in the books, I believe. It may be more than that because it was $38 million before the McCaffrey deal hit. So it's probably like $44 million. So we are negative $44 million right now. We have to sign Brock Purdy. Our intention is going to be to sign Brock Purdy. That's $55 million. So you come back and you go, how do I sign Brock Purdy at $50 million and then also have added in the Brandon Ayuk $30 million per year? That's $80 million more per season. And granted, you can set up the numbers on the early part of the contracts low, but collectively, you're basically adding $80 million on the books between 2 players on the Niners books as they're already $40 million in dead money. Something's got to give. There is not a cap acrobatics that can be put into play to get around the fact something has got to give. And being that they are in the back end of this window, being that they are in the back end of kind of doing some of this pushing the numbers forward stuff, they don't have the room as much to be super flexible in that other side of things. This all leads back down to the bottom line for me, which is that by week one of Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, and Brandon Ayuk will not be on the 49ers roster because they can't afford to make it happen. And Ayuk is not going to play out this year on this contract year and just go, oh, okay, he's heading into what, year 5? He's already, from his standpoint, waited an extra year to get paid. And oh, by the way, Trent Williams is also barking about wanting to get more money too. Another situation they're going to have to deal with. So, Chad, I think that something's going to give. Someone's going to be moved. And the Parasol pick, the signing of Jawan Jennings, I think all this is a bit in preparation for that situation to go down. Where did CMC's brother go? He went to Washington. Geez, he looks just like his dad, too. Holy crap. Christian doesn't look anything. Christian, I think, looks more like kind of his mom. Luke looks just like his dad. Bryony says CMC's married now, though. We'll see how much that impacts his game. Yeah. What are you saying, man? What are you saying there, bro? Oh, Lordy. Swedish says, I remember a conversation about Sean Alexander when he approached 28. Not all his fault, but the cliff was there. And again, like with Sean, what you have in Christian McCaffrey approaching 28 is, what did Sean have? He had a lot of carries on that body at Alabama, and he had a lot of carries on that body in Seattle through the early part of his career on that first contract. And you come to that 28 and you go, yeah, the drop-off makes sense to me here. This isn't a guy that's been sparingly used. It's been a guy that's been sort of hammered through the late part of his tweens to his early 20s, and body's going to have a little bit less of that tread taken off the tire than you might typically look at a guy at 28 years old at another position like maybe, say, receiver or tight end. Brian says, check out Metallica's album with San Francisco Symphony. It was awesome. It was awesome. I have that one on. I go back and check out that one from time to time as well. That was really well done, Brian. Yeah. Very cool. Every band should probably do something like that at some point. Symphonies only make it more epic. Oh, says, oh yeah, Ender Sandman is dope. When COD 2019 used it. Yeah, it's good. It's still a good song. It's their big pop hit that really got them. One got them on the mark, but that one really put them on into the zeitgeist. Swedish says, Metallica went from their speed metal influences to their classic rock influences from Black Album on, and it didn't land with a lot of people, and I think struggled to identify what they became, IMO. I think that's an accurate way of putting it in Swedish. You know, I've had this with other bands too. You know, you go through your bands that you like in certain spots, and then your musical preferences will grow, and you'll like different things, and then you'll like this, and you still might like that thing, but this is more catching your imagination at the moment. And bands they develop and they change and they go through their different places. And you see this too with directors and actors and other forms of, you know, entertainment. It is a little bit of, I think, just the nature of being an artist is that you don't just end up staying in who you are, but not always of where the new place you go is going to be a place that people are going to welcome as much as the previous places you've been. And that's got to be hard for a band that just wants to go this direction sometimes, but they're not getting the same resonance as they once did with the other way they went. Chad says, yeah, nice vid on Abe's deadlift. Definitely a great sign. By the way, my name is pronounced Wombolt. I will try to remember that, Chad. Sorry, I mispronounced it, man. Try to get the last names right, but sometimes I add a letter in there, a couple vowels, a few syllables. But thank you, man. Good to see Abe looking good. Mythic says, one is amazing. That iconic solo never fails to make me headbang. Such a deep and profound meaning, too. It's got everything a great song should have, where you can just listen to the song and not hear anything in the lyrics of the song or any of that, and that doesn't matter. And then you can get into the depth of the song, and it's like, ooh, there's actually a very deep message to this song, by what influenced the song to be written, just by what they were singing about and talking about in the song. But so many, just great changes and beats to the song, from what it goes from this to this to this to this. It's transitions. And the metal influences that you feel. I know it's not their pure speed metal stuff, but that's in there in that song. And it goes hard. That song definitely goes hard. For Whom the Bell Tolls, definitely one of my favorite. I once wrote a screenplay for a horror movie where that was going to be the opening song that I would have had for the credit sequence in the script I wrote. So, guy driving fast on the freeway, and that was playing. For a reason specific. Mega says, I saw that and discussed it at length on Lions Talkback show I was on yesterday, B. The short answer for me is Dak not in Seattle ever. Nor me. That would be miserable. Especially, Mega, not only you're getting Dak, but then you're getting Dak at $55-60 million. Can't do it. Jeffrey says, I think the offensive line guy we wanted in the draft got injured. Zinter? Maybe so. Brian says, don't forget the old line they signed from the Rams 2B. Old line they signed from the Rams? The Seahawks? Did we sign a guy from the Rams? Lincoln? You mean? Master! This is Black Album got me into Metallica, and Unforgiven remains my favorite song, but working backwards through their discography tore my top off. Yeah, their stuff is so hard in the late 80s, like that. They're pure, and it's just energy, and it's just, they're operating off of it's just like the word I'd go to is just pure, and it's awesome. Definitely appreciate. I'm like that. I sort of backtracked it as well. Megan says, I cannot get my head around how one player can be paid more than the entire rugby team who has won the most Rugby World Cups, the All Blacks. Why something's got to give here and something's got to change, Megan, because it ain't right, and it ain't right from a lot of people's perspectives. So he says, Zeppelin and Metallica taught me it was cool to have long hair, listen to loud music, and still read Tolkien and Hemingway. They oddly go together, don't they? It's an odd thing, but they do kind of intermesh. Strangely enough, all of those. Lord Boom says, Brandon, the only problem I have with DK's penalties is that our receiver is an enforcer when it should be the offensive line doing that job. Can't get DK hurt, but somebody has to enforce. It's a great point, Lord, and just to kind of jump on the back of this one a little bit, we heard from San Francisco last year with Shanahan talking about this, and with Fred Warner and obviously trying to target DK to get him sort of triggered on this stuff a bit, was that they were trying to get him to blow his top. And that means that with the way that the officials are going to already watch DK with a kind of a microscope to make sure he's not doing anything to make him be too physical. Don't be too physical, DK. Don't play the game too hard. Don't be too rough. Since they're already kind of being sensitive to him on that, you're right. It does have to be somebody else that can kind of step forward to be that guy at that point. And who is going to be that guy? We'll see. Or if there's going to be a guy that can come forward to be that guy. But, you do need those guys that, even in this day and age, that's all about passing and physicality has been removed. You still need the guys that can step in there at times and be that guy. And DK shouldn't always have to be that guy. That's for sure. He takes a lot of it on himself for sure too, but it would be nice to see one of those linemen come up and maybe take over a little bit of that load. Lord Boom says, Brandon, in the same context of DK enforcing, him as a slot is going to scare the bejesus out of linebackers. Yeah, you wouldn't want DK come pull down on you and climb down to the second level with some speed behind him, with some force behind him, because he's going to weigh him and Fred Warner are going to weigh the same. Normally you get a slot receiver if you're a linebacker trying to block you, and you're going to bounce that kid off the turf because he's going to be a small little 5'9" mighty might. But not the case here. Not the case here. And I bet they utilize DK for that. Paul Third says, I think Samuel will be the odd man out, and I think they go forward with Ayuk Parasol as an Arizona Sun Devils reunion. I could see it, Paul. And that would be to your point, that would be the direction I would go if I was the Niners. And I thought that they had set that stage a little bit with that draft. And okay, we'll get what we can get for Debo now. He goes, we pick up a pick for him. It's a receiver-rich draft. We go get a guy with some of Debo's skill set to him, and then ride with the rest. And they didn't do it. But some of this could be that they thought, we're not getting good enough draft compensation for this draft, so we'll just trade him around training camp, and then we'll get what we can get. It does seem like, Paul, though, with that call from Ayuk the other day, where he's already done a variety of things to kind of softly push his way out of town as it is. At one point or another, you got to wonder if there's going to be a line of like a Rubicon that gets crossed here by Brandon Ayuk, where the Niners are like, all right, you're scrubbing your social media. Okay, you're requesting trade. Okay, you're calling Jaden Daniels saying they don't want me. Okay, and it gets a bit too much where they're like, all right, we're done. But we'll see. We'll see. That's the route I'd go, though, Paul. I got to pay either Brandon Ayuk $30 million, or I move Debo Samuel and pay what is his $25 million per year cost. Pretty easy decision at that point. Chad says, yeah, thanks for the commentary. Ayuk, totally feel that. I think the 49ers are basically done, at least for the next few years. Anyway, had to pop in. Always great stuff. Got to bounce for the night. Have yourself a great night, Chad. Thanks for hopping on in, bud. They're definitely in a bit of a pickle out there in San Francisco. And this is the hard part with having those long Super Bowl windows. Is it's not just about your guys getting older. It's not just about the need to restock the shelves of talent as that talent starts to drain away. It also becomes about the cost. The cost starts to get maximized by the end of the Super Bowl window. Everybody's getting highly paid. How do you manage that? Who stays, who goes? How do you cut something that's still valuable to you while understanding this is a little more valuable to us? Tough decisions. Tough decisions. And you don't usually end out for the betterment of having to make those choices. Jeffrey Thistle in the house. What's up, Jeff? Good to see you, man. And he has been celebrating over 2 years of Hawks Nest membership. Look at that. Pumpkin stoked by that, Jeffrey. I'm stoked by that. Thank you for that. I really appreciate you for that. He says Witherspoon will lead all cornerbacks in INTs, tackles, and sacks, even if we suck this year. P.S. Purdy media talk bothers me. To me, any quarterback could run that offense. I'll tell you this, it's very, very, very delicious for me. The thought of the Niners not only trading away Brandon Ayuk, but trading away Brandon Ayuk, keeping Debo Samuel, and then paying Brock Purdy $50 million next year. You want to talk about the quickest thing that will close the Super Bowl window up and close it fast, is if the San Francisco 49ers give Brock Purdy $50 million. I am not saying Brock's bad. I'm not saying Brock hasn't been able to be a good quarterback for them in that system, but he's been the beneficiary of those supporting parts to a major degree. And paying him like he is driving those supporting parts, which is what you're doing at that $50 million rate, is fool's gold. And with already the cap being where it is with the Niners as you look, with already them being $40 million dead money in the hole as you go into next year, and they may be dealing with a situation like the Rams are going to deal with Donald, where Williams may not last for much longer. He may want to retire here soon. And then not only now do you have to replace that left tackle, but you have his dead money then just sitting on the books for a year or two. The Rams will still be paying Aaron Donald $36 million on their books next year. So I'm the same way on that. Purdy on his rookie deal, that's one thing. Purdy at $50 million, that's a whole different conversation. And Spoon leading the league, all cornerbacks in INTs, tackles, and sacks. Absolutely could see it. The INT one might be the hardest one, but he had his share of hand. He's just got to get his hands a little bit better. He had at least 3 or 4 interceptions he dropped last year. He had another one called back due to penalty. So he had his share of times where he could have gotten some picks last season. And playing out of the slot, Jeffrey, is going to allow him to rack up a good amount of tackle numbers, especially with his willingness to really come down on the running game and play it like a linebacker. Be active, fight off blocks with some tenaciousness, really be a defender that's not just a run defender and that you can tackle well at your size or you're a hitter, but that you actually get off blocks, fight off that. Some of that stuff I talk about with Woolen that he needs to build in a little bit more into his game. A little bit more ferocity, a little more fight. Jesse Lund, it's okay for us to be much better this year strictly because of coaching and still be a huge Pete Carroll fan. I agree, Jesse. And it's part where I try to make sure I'm being respectful when I do talk about the previous regime of not just painting Coach Carroll as some kind of villainous character and what's held us back all these years or something, because that's not the case. It's just the specific things that will be, I think, cleaned up and dealt with, or at least given a little bit more onus than they have in the past, which will provide the benefit. But Coach Carroll is still a very, very good head coach. I had a EJ Schneider, a bootleg football, was on with me a week ago and we were having discussions, and EJ is down there right now doing the work at the Elite 11. So Elite 11, you got those quarterbacks of the future there that are going to go and they're going to be part of the college scene going forward and all that. And EJ dropped me a cool little note because he's down there with Coleman. They're covering the whole 11-on-11 stuff and just getting a look at these guys kind of out ahead of time, which is smart on their part. And he said, Pete Carroll was at the Elite 11 last night. He had given a presentation during the day, but he was there at almost 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. Literally the last one off the field with us. Graciously stayed for probably 50 plus pictures after with everyone who asked. Unreal energy. EJ also said at the end, when Carroll was jogging off the field in front of us, he said out loud, kind of to us, kind of to himself, but really just more as a mantra for the world to hear. Last one off the field. Some guys just love it more than others. So I will say this, when I get a deal like that from Schneider mentioning that he's seeing Carroll say that, and Carroll's out there. This is an Elite 11 here. Carroll's out at. I think that this does speak to the fact that we coaches still going to jump back into this game some way or another. Is it at the college level? Is it going to be at the pro level? We'll see. But Coach Carroll's days are definitely not done at this point, I think. And I do believe, we can still revere him while talking about the things that will go well or improve with the new staff here and what they're going to address that wasn't addressed before. King's House says, I do love the Master of Puppets acoustic solo the most, personally. That's another good one. Nothing wrong with that. Swedish Shinobi says, Load and Reload were basically Thin Lizzy albums. Pretty much, yeah. Which I like their rendition of the Whiskey in a Jar. That one's pretty good. You rest on that album, or do you? Richard's the same. My favorite band's like picking my favorite child. It's hard, yeah. That'd be a tough one for me too. I don't know if I got one that I can just go to and say, yeah, this is the one. Ryan White says, how much you want to bet? If the Commanders would have ended up with McDonald as their head coach, the media would already be crowning them Super Bowl champs. Since he's here, analysts give us 4 wins. Probably. You get that East Coast love out there, Ryan. That's always worth at least a win or 2 on that side of it. That Commanders team has a long way to go from a talent standpoint. They're in a much different situation than what McDonald gets to walk into here, where they have an offensive line that is okay, but needs a lot of rebuilding. Terry McLaurin was a good receiver, but they need to get some more built in around that. Tight end position. Defensively, you could kind of go all around the world. They got a good safety in Jatarius Martin. They have, we'll see what if Forbes can ever add any kind of weight, what he can be. And so you love their defensive tackles, but then you kind of go, boy, it's kind of empty all across the board. But I think they would have probably given more. If there's an analyst that's going to give the Seahawks 4 wins, Ryan, there would have been, if he was the Commanders, they would have given him a couple more for that reason alone. East Coast bias is a real thing. Megan, nothing wrong with Pink Floyd. I always go back to Pink Floyd. Lord Booms is the only metal band that has never changed to the greatest band of all time. Slipknot. That's another one. That's a big time fan. I like Slipknot. They're good. I'm not as much of the heavy metal stuff. So it's for me, it's just the. Brian Myers, B, it was Tremaine Anjukrum. I forgot about Trey Anjukrum. So I forgot about him, Brian. Okay. See what he brings to the table. Guy from the Rams was Akron. I'd spaced him out. It's a hard name to remember. That name doesn't exactly stick in the brain. Tremaine Atrum. JL says DK is going to get his revenge, no doubt. I hope he does. Especially for what Fred Warner did to him, trying to take out his neck last year. Fred needs to catch a stray for that. Paul Megan, sorry. Ron never saw someone who knows Jethro Tull were color me surprised. Hey, Jethro Tull. It's hard to be a heavy metal band with a flute, man. They pulled it off. They were a heavy metal band with a flute playing front man who would stand on one leg like a flamingo. But they made it work. Sitting on the park bench. Doo, 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 doo. I didn't know. Hear the words. Ron's got Kansas is my favorite group of all time. Love their music. Steve Walsh is a legendary singer. Kansas is good. Good pick too. Tool. Love me some Tool. Megan's got Queen. Queen's good. I like me some Queen. Lord Boom, Dave Grohl is my favorite rock singer of all time, to be honest. Not to mention he was the drummer with Nirvana. If you're a Seattle Seahawk, you have to love Nirvana. It's in the contract. It is. I think there's a base requirement if you're a Seattle fan. You gotta have Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains. I think have got to be the select four that have to be held in a, even if you're more of a preference to one or the other, you have to recognize all those are really good bands. No matter what. Because they were. I loved them all, though. So cool that we got all those bands at the same time coming out of our one location in our city. McGraw's good. He's done great work with Foo Fighters. Whole second career there with them. I was a Pearl Jam guy growing up, too, Free Truth. They were my preference. It's another band, though, where the later stuff didn't quite resonate, but I love their early stuff still, going back and listening to it. They got some great live performances, too. King's House, believe it or not, Abe Lucas is a massive metalhead. I'd believe it. He's got kind of a metal personality to him a bit. Certainly plays like it on the field. Brian, he says, how many bands can write about a foul human being sitting on a park bench eyeing little girls with bad intent? Snot running down his nose, greasy fingers on shabby clothes. Yeah, great line. It's that hook, man. When the hook hits, it's like it hits too hard, It can't be denied. It's a good point. Vegas says Pumpkin's my GM this year. Good GM. She's a good GM. Tony Wright, my man out in Atlanta. How you doing, Tony? Says, good evening, Brandon. How are you? What are your thoughts on the Falcons drafting quarterback Michael Penix, which shocked everyone? I have these occasional opinions, Tony, where I seem to find myself a bit on an island when it comes to general consensus. or opinions you're hearing from other people in regards to a given situation. And I have to own those moments where it's, okay, I'm maybe a little bit outside the box on this one in my outlook of things. My belief on it is this when it comes down to it, Tony. People seem to be very angry about the Michael Penix pick because they say, you signed Kirk Cousins because you're trying to get to a Super Bowl, so you need to max out that roster in every way you can. So therefore, you should have gotten another player instead of Kirk Cousins to maximize that roster out to take you to a Super Bowl. And my comp for this, Tony Wright, is to say, let's look at the Aaron Rodgers situation in Green Bay 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Seasons where they get to the conference championship, they're in a tight match down to the end. They can't get quite over the top, be it the Niners or the Buccaneers. And you come out of that game if you're a Packer fan and you say, man, it does feel like maybe we're a player away. This Packer organization that doesn't want to go out there and get that extra receiver for Aaron Rodgers, that Packer organization that doesn't want to go out there and be really active in free agency, that Packer organization that trusts their process and slow rolls the way they want to go about what they do, and it's successful for them then doing that role. Boy, they could have used an extra player here to get up over the top. I don't think that there's any way I look at your Atlanta Falcons seasons this upcoming year and I find your season ending. And at the end of the year, I sit there then as not a fan of the team, but just looking at it without any kind of bias to it one way or other and saying, if you had just not taken Michael Penix and you had that Dallas Turner, that would have been the thing to take you over the top for a Super Bowl this upcoming year or next year to get you over the top for a Super Bowl next year. I don't think that that's the case with your Atlanta team. Could you guys catch lightning in a bottle and take off this year and be really good? You could. A lot of things got to work in your favor for that to happen, I think. And I don't think it's necessarily a likelihood. But I think something that could upend that's much more likely than you being one player away is that if you lose Cousins, you're in the boat that the Aaron Rodgers was in with the Jets last year. No Michael Penix, you lose Cousins, your season's completely toast. Do we want to ride it in that way? We feel we have a contending team. We feel we're ready to, in an open division, go out there and try to see if we can kind of turn this around. And in this open division, take this division at least, and then we'll see what happens in the playoffs. That's what I think their mentality is, Tony, is not that they think they're a Super Bowl contender. I think they look at it and say, hey, we're a division contender. So we're going to take these moves and we're going to operate like that. And we're not going to let Cousins sink our division contending state of things and write it all on that, the guy coming off an Achilles injury, the guy that's 35 plus years old. We're not going to do that. That's not smart. It wasn't smart of the Jets to take that approach last year and try to trust in Wilson, who they wanted to reclaim. So from my standpoint, Tony, I say it's a smart move for the Falcons, especially because they didn't just take Michael Penix because he was just there and I guess we got to get a quarterback to get a quarterback. They also loved the guy. They were sold on the guy. They believed in his talent. And so I'm one on that situation where, Tony, I wouldn't have signed Kirk Cousins to begin with, but I actually think it makes a lot of sense to go with a Michael Penix guy in signing Cousins because you can potentially still push for a division. If Cousins goes down, that doesn't lower the upside down of your team to me in taking Penix, like your potential upside. It does if you lose Cousins and you don't have anything behind Cousins to reinforce it. But Tony, I did a video on my Clips channel on this, and people were, I think it's from Falcon fans, were even getting pissy about it. I'm like, all right, I get it. I might be a little bit alone on this one, but I get the process of what they were doing there. And I don't care about pissing off Cousins. That doesn't matter, Tony. That's what's on. Well, you make Cousins mad. Who cares? He's not the long-term answer there. He's a gun for hire. He's a guy we're bringing in for a couple of years. He knows what he is. And it's not my job to make him warm and fuzzy. That's what the money's for. The money's to make you feel warm and fuzzy, Kirk. And if you're so scared by competition, boy, it doesn't bring a lot of faith and confidence in us in signing you that big contract if this young kid's got you so scared. But so I like the deal, Tony. I did. And I think I think Michael Penix is going to be a good quarterback in this league, and I think he's going to a good situation for him. Really good situation for him, too, on top of that, Tony. Deron says, it's just my opinion. 1's Beatles, 2 Queen, 3 Led Zeppelin, 4 Journey, 5 Rolling Stones, 6 Metallica, Van Halen, Pearl Jam, Guns N' Roses, 10 Kansas. It's a good list. All quality bands, Deron. All quality bands. I definitely would have, I'd probably flip out GNR for Floyd. I don't know if I'd have Kansas in there necessarily. I have to think about that one. God, that'd be tough to come up with the top 10. I don't hate your choices, though. I mean, those are all solid. Probably flip a few out. But overall, a good list, Ron. Tony says, and Michael Penix was throwing fastballs through the wind and rain, which impressed all the Falcons brass. I like the pick. I do too, Tony. And I would not tell you if I didn't. You know, I'd shoot it down if I didn't. But I think with Kirk Cousins, this is a guy getting in elder age. He's not the most mobile of guys. You guys can get out of the contract after 2 years. He's coming off a major injury. These things make a lot of sense as to why you'd go, all right, let's get some insurance and reinforcement. And again, to your point on this, this was not just to take a guy. This was to take a guy that you were sold on by his talent. And Tony, you know, for me, 3-4 months leading up to the draft, I was telling my chat and telling people there's going to be 6 quarterbacks taken inside of the top 16 selections. And this is going to happen not because simply just there's so many quarterback needy teams. That's a part of it, but also because there's so many quarterbacks that have earned the right to be selected in the top half of the first round. The 54 starts from Bo Nix, the 2 straight years from Michael Penix that he's put up that have been absolutely fantastic, nearly Heisman worthy. The Jaden Daniels year that he put up and the light bulb coming on for him. The talent of Drake May that's undeniable, and Caleb Williams the same. Those guys there's too much of the goods there not to have them be picked. The years where we see quarterbacks not being taken, or when there's a little bit more of a mixed bag on where you see the opinion, is the years like where your Falcons took a Desmond Ridder, where nobody could figure out whether it was going to be Malik Willis or Pickett or Ridder as the first quarterback. Nobody could figure out if 3 quarterbacks were going to go or if no quarterbacks were going to go in the first round. So he deserved to go up in that stage of things. You guys took him in the right spot. If you didn't take him, Tony, the Raiders were probably going to take him, if not the Broncos. And I think when we look down the line, 2 to 3 years down the line on this, Tony, I think more Falcon fans who might be a little bit not as on this move might be a lot more like, oh, I get it now. Okay, this makes sense now. This adds up. This tracks. I like the pick too. I'm with it. Faith No More, another good band. Paul Third says, I don't believe Purdy's elite, but he's not being carried. His O-line is bad outside of Williams. He is a slippery playmaker. Yeah, I don't know. It's let me give you my data that goes to the support of my position on this. We look like 2 years ago, stats that stood out to me, Paul, were the Niners led the league in getting the ball out of their quarterback's hand faster than any quarterback in the sport. Is that good decision-making on the quarterback, or is that more likely he's been well coached and well schemed to have his first read open to get the ball out of his hands as quickly as humanly possible? To me, I go more to the coaching on that than I give that to necessarily the credit of Purdy on that. When you have 3 of your receivers leading the league in separation per route, in Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, and George Kittle, 3 of the top 15 in the league, creating that short separation, you getting the ball out of your hand as quick as humanly possible in the NFL, quicker than anybody else. And then you also have Christian McCaffrey as well as an outlet option, in addition to those 3 guys creating that separation. I think that does help out tremendously. Having the defense on the other side of it, big aid and big help. Is this not to say that he isn't doing things that are good? He's definitely doing things that are good. But my whole point on this has been, Paul, is that if you remove some of these factors at play, he's not going to perform as well. If Trent Williams goes down, how is Purdy going to go? If you have to trade Brandon Ayuk at the start of the season and they lose Trent Williams midway in through the year, how does that offense look? And I think it's remarkably different. When you look at, since Purdy took over and started, he's had a lot of good health on that offense, which has allowed him to have the full assembly of his playmakers on the outside. You move that deep assembly of playmakers from him, he starts to get a little bit more exposed. He starts to have to go through second and third reads. There's not as much the separation out there on the routes. Not to say he's a bad player, but I wouldn't even necessarily go to saying he's carried, but where he's being placed as far as if he's looked at as a top 10 quarterback in the sport by people, that's on the back of the supporting cast he's had. And I put Purdy in what other team do I put Purdy that he finds the success in this league? The same kind of success that he's had in San Francisco. I don't know. I don't know on that one. He definitely is slippery. He's got that fast 10-yard split and some mobility to get away from things, but there's limitations there too on the other side of it, like arm strength. And if you have to make him process like the Ravens forced him to process in that game, you can expose some things in his game as well. Fu Manchu recommendation. Check him out. Josh Homme, whatever he does. Queens of the Stone Age. Josh Homme's good. Very good. Herbicide says, unpopular opinion, Soundgarden was not good live. They're the least of it, of the four for me. They're on the list because they got their spot, but there's definitely some songs a little repetitive. Cornell kind of carried some of that group a little bit. But even Cornell, I heard he was really good live with his voice. Even the rest of the band, huh? Rodney says, when are you doing Mariner content? I've been a little bit hard pressed on it, Rodney. The interest in doing it 2 years in a row on the Mariner channel, really had a hard time driving much kind of traffic on the channel. There's just not as much people watching for Mariner content on the YouTube stuff. And the tough part is that, this is the main job stuff I do over here. And, we're monetized on this. And, what I do on the Seahawks channels is what I get to pay to do. When I do the Mariner stuff, I have to do it kind of for free time, which wouldn't be a problem, but it then takes away from the time of doing the Seahawks channel stuff. So then it ends up being kind of costly to do it. So I might do some streams throughout as we get later on in the year on that side of it, but it's more of just I have to balance things out a little bit. It became a little bit too much trying to do the two channels. And if there had been, a little bit more of an interest, it would have been easier to do it, but there just wasn't as much there on it, Rodney. I won't shut it down or anything, but it just, I'll put the Seattle football stuff kind of at the forefront. Jay Quest, I'm just here looking for the Hawk Tua girl. I was thinking about playing that today. I thought people have a hard enough time with the thumbnail, so I better not overstep the line. Red Hot Swedish Shinobi, Red Hot Chili Peppers was the worst band I've ever seen. So disappointing. It was the EMP grand opening concert. I've from others, they're great live, but not that day. Oh, that's odd. That is interesting. I had heard that from others that they're pretty good live too. So some days you just aren't always on. I can relate to that. It's hard to, concert may be scheduled, but maybe you just ain't feeling right. Or you're up partying the night before. Chris's Soundgarden could be hit and miss at times, but the earlier days, they were awesome. That's how it is with me. The stuff that hits is really good. Stuff that misses just feels a little sometimes repetitive with it. But certainly you got your Mount Rushmore of Seattle bands. I love the Mother Love Bones and your other ones that have their, depending on if we're going to consider Jimmy, of course, Seattle. But I think you got to go Pearl, Alice, Soundgarden, and Nirvana. Hand Grenade Queen to me sounds the same when you hear them live or on the radio with Freddie as the head man. He had the chops for sure. Yeah, that seemed to be a good live band too. Can't say I saw him, but it would have been a cool band to check out. Richard says Cornell on vocals was awesome. I wish he joined Pearl Jam when they split. That would have been really great, especially with the Temple of the Dog stuff that Cornell and Eddie did with their voices went together really well. They could have done a whole album for sure. I would have bought it. Duran, The Who's a good one too. I like The Who too. They'd be on the outside of my top 10, but another good band. Toadies. Toadies is good. You guys are great suggestions on the chat here. I expect nothing else from my Seattle folks. Paul says, anyways, off to the pub for Friday drinks. Well, have yourself a great one, Paul. Enjoy. Paul says statistically, Graph PFF throws to the same amount of separated receivers as Jordan Love. He throws to the same amount of separated receivers as Jordan Love. Shanahan's scheme, maybe. I don't know. It seems that there's just a stigma around the kid because of his draft position. Reminds me of they used to ish on Russ. I think that's fair. That's fair to a degree, I'd say, Paul. I do think in looking at some of that data with Jordan Love, he's also being provided a lot of first read looks that are being schemed open well by the coach there in LaFleur. Like he's giving him a lot to work with on that first read to go look to. So there is some benefits there to Jordan Love and what he's being given in that offense that are some similar benefits to what you get with Brock Purdy. And we'll find out at some point or another. You know, we learned, Paul, with Russell Wilson that he could elevate and become a top 5 quarterback in this sport for a given couple of year period. We'll see if Brock Purdy can elevate in that same way once he gets paid, once some of his supporting cast is pulled away. But I think it is fair to say, when you look at that support that he's gotten, grade A coaching, grade A scheme, he's gotten the playmakers on the outside to throw to, the running backs to work with. You mentioned the offensive line, which is certainly a fair point to a degree, but some of the offensive line stuff, Paul, gets mitigated by the fact that the ball is so quickly out of his hand. The pass protection doesn't get exposed if my coach can scheme up plays to get the ball out of the hand for the quarterback. And what happens when that does get removed? What happens when you aren't allowed to get the ball out of your hand at the fastest rate in the entire NFL? Does that change your game? Does that change your, how you play at that point? And again, I'm not saying he's a bad quarterback or that he's just the product of his system there, but I have a sneaking suspicion that you remove some of the parts from Brock Purdy and that changes him considerably as a quarterback, and that he's gotten to have as good a supporting cast and all the way around in from the coaching to the players on the outside to work with as anybody in the NFL. And while I do give a little bit of onus to what you talk about in the offensive line, one stat that I've come back to on just one thing for particular, let's look at run blocking. The last 2 years, the Seattle Seahawks and all 5 of their starters, you've not had one of your 5 starters have above a 58 run blocking grade by the end of the year. Not one. Both the Rams and the Niners, the last 2 years, all 5 of their starters have all had higher than a 58 run blocking grade. So the support is still there, though the line may not be the greatest line. I don't know if it's a bad line either. You do have Trent Williams as your all pro. They've got the one guy that was a Pro Bowl alternate on there. I'm not saying it's a good line, and it's certainly a thing that's a little susceptible for him, but I don't know on that one. You know what I mean? We'll see on this one, Paul. We'll see how this one plays out. But I feel pretty strongly about this. And when you look back last season, the one time in a year and a half of Brock Purdy starting, when Trent Williams did go down with a little bit of a leg injury, when you had then the oblique that Christian McCaffrey was dealing with, they had one other kind of injury. His play dipped heavily. That was at the point when he dealt with the Ravens game and the Browns game, and he didn't look like quite the same player. But we'll see on that. We'll see. McFurr, would you ever consider Sonic content when they come back? Yeah. Oh yeah, we've even got the name for it chosen out. So I'd absolutely would. The main thing I have to do is you've got to put the time in on the channel here to make sure I'm keeping it at a spot where I'm making enough to do this full time. And so it's like if you go and do the side thing, that's going to be a thing that takes away from the other thing. That's where it gets hard to do it. So by that point, once the Sonics come back, I'll be a little bit more of a firmer footing to be able to pull that off. But just we're in that weird stage of things right now where I need to maximize off the football channel. And the long term, we'll have something going with the baseball channel too. It's just, I've got more of a build in to be able to slowly roll that up, because 2 years of the Mariner channel, we didn't even get that thing monetized. So it's like, you just got to be willing to kind of take in the shorts on that one until we can get it to the place it needs to be. But I'll try to do a few Mariner streams, especially if they're in contention this year at some point. Swedish Shinobi, we need a Seattle Rock power ranking. That'd be a pretty deep list. I think we could easily come up with 10 bands. Like it was no thing. Ron, can't stop the spirits when they need you. This life is more than it's a read through. But Elliott Lane Staley's the best front man of all time. Hell of a voice on that guy. Hell of a voice. My pecking order, it was back in the day. It was kind of Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, but Alice in Chains was probably number 2 there for me. Boys, I saw a pic of Freddie wearing a Seahawks hat. Yeah, you can find Freddie in Seahawks gear, Freddie Mercury. If you Google it on the internet, it's out there. TJC says, do you think the Seahawks are underrated this year by the media outside? Yes, but I don't think that they're being unfairly underrated, TJC. I think that what the media is doing is just fitting to what is historical norms. And when a legendary head coach moves on and a new coach runs in, that new coach is probably not likely to just find immediate success coming into those kind of circumstances. So I think that they're more playing the odds of how historically this plays out in the NFL more than they're really looking intricately at the Seattle Seahawks. And that's why they're underrating them. So I think that their outlook is not unfair because, as I always say with this type of stuff, TJ, you want to try to count on, in these kind of situations, if you're trying to predict something, predict what's most likely to happen. Don't predict the anomaly or the outlier is going to happen because it's an outlier for the reason. It rarely occurs. But in this situation, there's a lot of parameters in place that can create that outlier. Specifically, GJ, the level of talent that Mike Macdonald is inheriting versus the level of talent that those other coaches would have been inheriting in those other positions. I've long referenced Jimmy Johnson as a comparative on this, where Jimmy Johnson walks in for Landry. Landry's very long in the tooth. There's not a lot of talent left on that roster outside of Herschel Walker. They move Herschel Walker in order to get themselves draft picks to restock back up the talent that's so bereft of the organization. And it was going to then take them a year. They had Troy Aikman there as a rookie. He had to go through his lumps. So the bad first year of Jimmy Johnson was understandable because of what he was inheriting and where the franchise was at. It seems like a little bit of a night and day difference here with Macdonald and what he's walking into. And so that should theoretically breed about more success. Will it? We'll see. But I do think, yes, there's a little bit of an underrating by the media because of that, but not unfairly so. Duran says, I often forget about Alice in Chains. Can't say why. So many bands, man. It's easy to forget sometimes. They were really good. Riverside says, for some odd reason, I saw Alice in Chains like 7 times. They played every massive concert I went to. That's cool. I saw them. I went to a Metallica concert at the Gorge and saw them with, they had the Alice in Chains there, but it was just Cantrell. It was after Staley had passed. Cantrell put on a hell of a show, though, too. Played a few Pink Floyd songs. Metallica was really good. We had a metal moment at the Gorge where Metallica's playing and people were throwing crap on the stage and somebody threw a bottle and hit the bassist I forget his name is, but hit the bassist in the head with the bottle. And the bassist stops playing, walks off. Metallica stops playing. And Metallica walks back out about 2 minutes later and they say, somebody just threw and hit him in the head with this bottle. You guys are going to point out to us in the audience who hit him in the head with this bottle, or we're not going to continue playing. And everybody in the audience at the Gorge pointed out the mofo that had thrown the bottle. Security drags this guy out of the audience, probably takes him backstage to get beaten to hell. It was a metal concert, though. Very metal moment. Yeah, Duran, Hearts from Seattle. First, changed my mind. Mud Honey. Another good one. Truth Alice played itself as a poser, though, for real on the streets. Lord Boom, I agree. Red Hot Chili Peppers was not very good live, even when I seen them. I tell you who was really good live? Rage Against the Machine. Rage Against the Machine would have been awesome. I don't know if I could have stayed out of the mosh pit if I went to a Rage Against the Machine. That's a bucket list item if you're going to see that band. Seahawks Gaming, say what you all want about Russ, but his deep balls were the best in NFL history. Made you think he threw that in double coverage, but still get that ball to his receivers. Definitely one of the best deep ball throwers in NFL history, bar none, Seahawks Gaming. You're putting that list together, he's got to be included. Nobody threw it with and not only how far he could throw it, but with the height that he could throw it with to get that teardrop kind of factor to it. He was great with that. Mr. Dog says we have an entire new coaching staff. All it takes is one of them to suck for the Seahawks to be in trouble. True. Very true. That's that variance we get to where definitely a great year could be had. Also could be a bit of a down season. It's hard to predict which end of the scale we're going to be in on. All-time front man, just 1/100th of a point above Plant, Paul Rogers. Paul Rogers had one of the classic voices. Feel like making love. Doom, doom, doom. Woo. Yeah, I like, as a hell of a band too. Underrated band. Duran says this whole conversation just shows how long and rich the music history is. 70s, 80s, and 90s were incredible. They were golden era of rock and roll, in my opinion, is that 3 decades. And we've not been able to touch back into it. You know, there's bands doing still some really great stuff, but that was a real special time. We were a little spoiled. 6-hour Tool concert, Free Truth. That's nuts. Phoebe says, how would you describe the first half of the 2023 season in one word and the second half of the season in one word? First half of the season. I'd say first half of the season, I would say encouraging but worrisome. And that's more than one word. What's a word that means encouraging but worrisome? Encouraging, but that's almost too positive for the first, because there was like the Rams game. There were some things you were still kind of worried. The back end of the schedule, I would say, is underachieving, is what I would say on the back half. I'm not sure on the front. So I can't go to just one theme of what was on that front with using one word, you know. And love myself some Tool, Free Truth. Absolutely. Great band. Ran the cut. I'm far too young to engage in this conversation. It happens, man. Yeah, Tool always puts on a good show. Riverside, best show I ever saw. I didn't go to many concerts, so I didn't have a chance to go and do a lot of concerts I got to check out. Unfortunately, I didn't do enough. I didn't see enough concerts to give you a good reference on that. Lord Boom, when I went to the last Kiss concert, they came out with walkers. Laughing Out Loud, the Demon Walker had flares on it, but it was still a walker. Oh, Lordy. Oh, Lordy. Okay, Al. Well, I want to let me thank the sponsor of this show today. That's going to be Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy has got ongoing great deals here for you guys right now. If you want to take part, they will match you up to 100% of your first deposit, up to $100. Match you up to that first deposit if you use my code NEST on their site for the first time. Or just click down in the description section link below, and they will get you hooked up in that way as well. So if you want to do that, that's also a little bit of a pathway you can go to them. But if you haven't, please do go there and utilize this code today, as you can get $100 of free money back in your pocket, $100 deposit, matched up to $100. So $100 in your pocket, and you support the show at the same time. It's called win-win-win-win. Now, there are some restrictions in the state of Washington, but if you are in a casino, they will allow you to use the app in full within the state of Washington there. They also have a great ongoing contest here with Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, 0.5 points higher. So kind of just a free win there almost a bit. An easy peasy one there for you, if you will. And then that just goes right in conjunction with that $100 matching of the deal. So they make it very easy for you to get that first win if you want, and to go into it. And they have been so kind as to sponsor the show here throughout this year. So please do show them some love over there if you get the chance. You can also get in on the Mariners action right now. You want to take advantage of this hot season they're having, win some money while your Mariners are out there winning some games. Well, you can do that right now with them as well. Get in the daily fantasy with that. Put the money down, go win yourself some money, and support the show at the same time. But thank you to Underdog Fantasy for all of your support here for this channel throughout the course of this year. We'll probably get the last couple comments in here wrapped up. I will be away about a week here. We'll be back next Wednesday probably, as we're getting some stuff done here at this house and we're getting the termites handled here. So be a little bit of a time before back in here with you guys, but we'll be back very soon here as we turn through this off season. Boom says Dave Grohl's the best front man of all time. I'm sorry. Second's Fogarty, in my opinion. Those are good front men. There'll be a few people out there that probably jump in with you on that. Foo Fighters' first tour in Pullman, huh? They did a Pullman tour, huh? Dang. That must mean they did 3 shows in the state. They must have done Pullman, Gorge, and Seattle. Stuart says Foghat in concert blew my mind. Great fun. I'm in the mood. The rhythm is right. Move to the music. I haven't even seen any bad selections around the chat on these bands. Bullet for Butterfly? I haven't heard Bullet for Butterfly. CCR fan, even when my little kid. I always like CCR. They're good. They put some good music together. That'd be a good band to be a cover band. They had a lot of hits too. It'd be fun to do that. That'd be fun to do that. That'd be fun. X wasn't a fan. I wish I'd gone to more concerts as a kid. Didn't get to it. Didn't quite get to it. Dave Matthews, my brother's favorite band growing up. I don't know if he's as much as into it. Oh, I stand grenade, Christopher. Yeah, there's the funny story of the Foo Fighters talking about Christopher Walken introducing him at Saturday Night Live, and it is very funny. Ladies and gentlemen, Foo Fighters. That's good. Herbicide says, go Hawks, I'm out. Good night, everybody. I think that's a great time to call it on this note, folks. We will be back here in a week. And hey, just let you know, we do have a Hawks Nest Clips channel going right now. It's called Hawks Nest Clips. All these live stream shows, I'm cutting up moments from these live stream shows. I'll be doing some extra clips on those channels as well. We're really going to be pushing that on as a tandem channel with this channel. So if you haven't already, please do get over there to the Hawks Nest Clips channel, as we're going to be pushing a lot on there. I'm having daily content from these live stream shows go over there. So daily, it's going to be my commitment to have at least one clip off that channel every day going live for you guys. So do get subbed up over on that side, the Hawks Nest Clips channel. As I said again, thanks to the Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring the show. We are moving our way along here. But to finish off on the final point here for this channel and this show today, the Seattle Seahawks may contend next year. Is it something I say that you should count on? Should you go get a tattoo saying Seahawks Super Bowl champions 2024? No, I'm not saying that you should do that. But is there a potentiality? Is there a chance that this team can find its footing this season with the great young talent that they have assembled to get to that contending state this year? Yeah, it absolutely could happen. It is not so crazy as to think when there is this much talent. You had one of the greatest trades in NFL history that you performed in that Russell Wilson deal. And the proceeds of which that you got, you're going to be able to benefit from, and you have been able to benefit from. And by that benefit, maybe that takes them to the higher heights than many are thinking out there. Certainly the pundits and the analysts are not going to have us in a contending state. But make no mistake about it, John Schneider has restocked the shelves. This team is built deep and strong. It's just a matter of how long it will take for them to get to those heights. It may take a year, may hit this year, may take 2 seasons. It's hard to predict this type of thing. But when you have this good of talent, when you've brought on these smart of coaches, it does feel like it is just simply a matter of time. My name is Brandon Kane, TheSeahawksNest. Please, if you can for me, folks, hit that like button on the way out the door today. Helps the channel grow, helps the channel get bigger, helps us to just get the footing a little bit more stronger towards that 20,000 subscriber mark that we are aiming for this upcoming season. I want to thank you guys for the great talk. Love the rock and roll talk at the end, as we always love that. We go any which way we can go here. We'll go wherever you guys want to take us on these shows. So love talking about it. We'll be back next Wednesday with another show at that time. But until that time, I shouldn't have to remind you with this good of talent after this show where I've laid down the case for how this team can be so damn good. But I'm going to let you know anyway. Please do not you ever forget. Don't you ever forget. Go Hawks.